Chapter 2598, Group of Ancient Tombs. More and more people came here, not only ninth heaven celestial kings, but also the eighth heaven, seventh heaven, and even lower-level celestial kings. Everyone knew that the ninth heaven celestial kings had a great plan to level a dangerous place, wherein hid earth-shattering treasures that could even turn a celestial king into a heavenly venerate. Who was the first to spread this news? It could no longer be verified. However, it obviously had an amazing effect as it caused this area to be extremely crowded and filled with oceans of people. When there were too many people, conflicts would inevitably arise. Furthermore, there were no rules in the Celestial King graveyard. Killing people was a very common thing. Bloody battles occurred on a daily basis. In fact, even large-scale team battles would burst out. The Empress and Bewitching Maiden Row disguised themselves to participate in many team battles since it would not be conducive for their growth to always work in seclusion. They were unlike Little Terror, its combat abilities had been instinctively ingrained, similar to a war soldier's. Exactly 10 million years passed, and this swamp was finally about to be leveled. The celestial kings from all corners gathered around it. Although the area was still astonishingly large, the swamp was only about 1.5 kilometers in size. There was a piece of land just ahead, but with the thickening mist, it could not be seen very clearly. All the celestial kings were very excited as they had finally completely emptied the swamp after another day's work, and now they could proceed unobstructed. When they stepped onto this piece of dry land, the fog dissipated, and they could see things within a 0.5 kilometers range. They saw that there were a few large graves erected sporadically around the area. Going by this calculation, there should be more large graves after the fog. The total number would be absolutely staggering. These tombs were enormous. The tombstones alone measured up to 300 meters in height, and the burial mound itself was like a hill, exuding a strong oppressive, menacing feeling. There were so many tombs. Which one was the ancient tomb? Everyone, the ancient tomb is in the centermost area. We need everyone to work together to clear a path towards it. There are still some minor hurdles here. Desolate Moon appeared, and stood at the forefront. Friend Desolate Moon, please lead the way, everyone said. Those who are willing to follow my lead to the ancient tomb can come along with me. However, there are opportunities in every tomb here the young ones may wish to explore, Desolate Moon said. Where there are opportunities, there will also be dangers lurking. Make sure to stay alert and proceed with caution. Everyone was taken by surprise. Desolate Moon's strength was absolutely incomparable, and yet he showed such hesitation. It simply wasn't the way an elite would normally behave. This person was absolutely too mysterious. After speaking, Desolate Moon strode forward, while a large number of 9 heavenly celestial kings looked at each other, and began trailing behind him. No one believed that Desolate Moon could have set a trap, because who could have managed to pass through such a terrifying swamp? Even if Desolate Moon had any malicious intention, he could only use what was originally laid out here to target them. Therefore, the safest way would actually be to follow Desolate Moon. With so many ninth heaven celestial kings working together, even a first-tier heavenly venerate would feel trepidation. Besides, should Desolate Moon be telling the truth, and the remaining 6 parts of the 9 transformations divine scroll were really hidden here, then they needed to follow him all the more. The crowd of ninth heaven celestial kings left, but told the rest to be cautious, and not get involved in conflicts rashly. There were too many second-generation young masters here, all of them short-tempered and arrogant. Should a fight break out, neither side would let up until they fought to the death. Brother Long, what should we do? Zhao Shuang asked Ling Han in a low voice. His life was in Ling Han's hands, and that had dissipated all his temper long ago. Ling Han's reply came with a sweeping glance. I naturally want to go into those ancient tombs and take a look. There wouldn't be any good prospects in following Desolate Moon. With so many ninth heaven celestial kings around, Ling Han wouldn't even be able to get any leftovers. However, if Desolate Moon was telling the truth, and there were indeed opportunities in the other ancient tombs, then Ling Han might as well try his luck there. After 10 million years, not only had Ling Han advanced his cultivation to the peak stage of the 4th heaven, he had also completely mastered and merged the 3 parts of the 9 transformations divine scrolls. His battle prowess had naturally improved further as well. Ling Han was confident that as long as a 9th Heaven Celestial King didn't make a move, even 8th Heaven Celestial Kings wouldn't be able to stop him. Of course, he still would not be able to defeat such an opponent hadn't reached that monstrous level of power necessary to be able to overlook the power gap of 4 whole cultivation levels. However, as long as I advance into the 5th heaven and add the Divine Demon Sword, I can definitely fight equally against an 8th Heaven Celestial King one. Even if 9th Heaven Celestial Kings decide to make a move, I will still be able to escape easily. Ling Han smiled. After so many years, he was finally about to reach the pinnacle in terms of regulations, reaching the strongest level in the traditional sense. "Follow me," said the Ain River Celestial King. As soon as the 9th Heaven Celestial Kings had left the scene, he was the undisputed leader of the younger generation. Yang Xiaoling had no objection, and when Zhao Shuang saw that Ling Han also had no objection, he naturally would not be objecting either. Let's go then. Chapter 2599, Defeated in 10 Strikes. When Wang Dongsun's words fell, a 6th Heaven Celestial King walked out. The Ain River Celestial King immediately frowned. Aside from himself, the strongest in their group were 3 4th Heaven Celestial Kings, and they were Ling Han, Yuan, and Yang Xiaoling, respectively. It was impossible that any of the 3 of them could be a match for He. Could it be that he would have to fight in the very first battle? But if he did not step out, that would only result in horrible defeat. He stepped out. "I alone am enough." He bared his teeth in a grin. "If you can withstand 10 strikes from me, I'll count it as your win." The Ain River Celestial King almost exploded in fury. "I am a 7th Heaven Celestial King monarch tier, and you are but at the 6th heaven. Now you're actually saying that you will defeat me in 10 strikes. Where did you get this courage and confidence from?" He calmed down abruptly, and stated calmly, "Fine then. I really wish to see how you will defeat me within 10 strikes." He clasped his hands behind his back. "Easily. Absolute nonsense." The Ain River Celestial King moved, launching an offensive at He. He smiled slightly, and moved to counterattack. It was clear that he was inferior by a cultivation level, yet was completely unafraid of battling the Ain River Celestial King. Pung! The 2 of them exchanged a blow. At the same time, their bodies shuddered before taking a few steps back. Teng, teng, teng. They both took 7 steps back before they steadied their footing again. Their exchange had actually resulted in a tie. On the side of Ghost King City, everyone looked shocked. This was inconceivable. A 6th Heaven Celestial King actually did not fall into a disadvantage in a clash with a 7th Heaven Celestial King. It should be known that the Ain River Celestial King was also a monarch tier at that. Zhao Shuang couldn't help but turn to look towards Ling Han. Aside from Ling Han, there actually were other such monstrous freaks. The Ain River Celestial King's expression was cool. "You do indeed have some slight strength, but don't even think of being capable of defeating me within 10 strikes. Oh, then let's put it to the test." He continued to move. With him tapping out a finger, boundless brilliance dazzled their eyes. The 9 Transformations Divine Scroll. Everyone felt a familiar wave. By now, there was practically no one that did not cultivate the 9 Transformations Divine Scroll, but the advancement of every single person was completely different. There were some dumb and rash people that had not managed to master even a single part of the Divine Scroll, but those with good aptitude had completed this step. Monarch tier elites were already cultivating the second part, and had even begun to meld the 2 parts together. Yet the might of this blow from He had far surpassed the level of having fused 2 parts of the 9 Transformations Divine Scroll together, and was of the strength of having fused all 3 parts together. What kind of aptitude was this? This was really too astonishing. Even the Ain River Celestial King's expression shifted. He was a monarch tier, but he was still in the midst of fusing the 2 parts of 9 Transformations Divine Scroll, Yet not only had the other party completed this step, he had even fused all 3 parts of the divine scroll into one. In comparison, the Yin River was basically trash. He was internally stunned, yet forcefully suppressed this shock. So what about it? He still had the advantage of a single cultivation level, after all. How could this gap be so easily compensated? 3 Yin tap. With a light exclamation, his index, middle, and ring fingers formed a strange gesture, and stabbed towards He. There was a black shadowy light entwined around the 3 fingers, bearing a cold feeling of eeriness. This was a powerful move, and had been further boosted with the 9 transformations divine scroll, so its might was increased. Pung! The 2 of them exchanged another blow, but they were still both sent backwards. It was hard to determine who was stronger between the 2 of them. He exclaimed lightly, and his figure flashed. Waving both fists in fury, he exuded a grand and magnificent feeling. It was clear that his battle prowess was equal to the Yin River Celestial King's, but the aura he exuded was incredibly domineering, as if he could crush the Yin River Celestial King. This was an incomparable confidence, and it was that unreasonable, overwhelming his opponent in terms of presence. Everyone was sure that if this was a battle of equal cultivation levels, He would definitely be capable of defeating the Yin River Celestial King within 10 strikes, but if there was a gap of a single cultivation level, how could this be achieved? 3 strikes, 4, 5. The 2 of them battled intensely. He indeed had a slight advantage, but to speak of defeating the Yin River Celestial King in the next few strikes, this was still too far away. 8 strikes, 9, and there was only 1 strike left. He suddenly shouted loudly, and his whole person suddenly shrank greatly, but one of his fists became bigger many times over. It was enshrouded in green light, with multiple seals flickering within. His aura suddenly soared to an unmatchable height. He threw out this punch, which descended harshly. Pung! A loud bang rang out, and the Yin River Celestial King was visibly sent flying. He opened his mouth, and a gust of blood spurted out. He forcefully turned himself around, and landed on the ground. His feet stood steady, but his figure was trembling slightly. His whole face had instantly turned completely red, and there was actually blood seeping from the corners of his eyes. This was due to his having forcefully suppressed the blood that had been about to escape from his mouth, but the impact that he sustained was really too great. It was actually flowing out of his eyes, and this made the situation become even more frightening. Though the Yin River Celestial King was still standing, and could still fight, everyone was aware that he had already lost. True enough, defeat in 10 strikes. He took a deep breath as well. In the last strike, he had used an ultimate move. Though he had defeated the Yin River Celestial King, to him, it was also an extremely great depletion. There was no way he could use it continuously. With this inhalation of air, his body also puffed up, as if his body was being inflated with air. You really can't withstand a single blow. Wang Dongsun laughed loudly, seeming extremely proud. The people from Ghost King City could say nothing in response. What else could be done when one had inferior skills? If it really came down to a battle, they would only be facing a one-sided massacre. Ling Han did not interfere. What did this have to do with him? He swept an eye over the masses, and then pointed a finger at one person. You, tell me about that Li Long, and not the slightest bit should be hidden from me. That person adhered to the Yin River Celestial King, and was a second heaven Celestial King. Though he very much wanted to stay stubborn, and put on a fine performance of loyalty in front of his master, when he saw that cold, expressionless face of He, his heart jolted. Hurriedly, he blurted out all he knew about the topic. He humphed. Pa, he sent out a palm strike, and killed that person with brute force. Knowing nothing, what use are you? You, the Yin River Celestial King was infuriated, and tossed a glare at him. Do you, too, want to die? He's eyes were menacing, the gaze he directed at Yin River Celestial Chi filled with killing intent. The Yin River Celestial King clenched his fists tightly, but still withheld himself from exploding in fury. To say nothing of the fact that there were still two sixth heaven celestial kings here, as long as he joined forces with Wang Dongsun, they would be able to kill him in a short while. He could choose to flee, but if so, what was the point of putting up a brave front at this moment? Let's go. Wang Dongsun waved a hand, and they walked towards the ancient tomb first. Only when they had all disappeared did everyone finally sigh in relief. They could feel a cold sweat covering their entire bodies. Just now, they had really been a line away from death. If it had really resulted in a battle, then most likely everyone else aside from the Yin River Celestial King and Yuan would have had to die. Are we still going in? Someone asked. We are. The Yin River Celestial King squeezed out through clenched teeth. Though our strength is inferior to the other parties, when contending for fated opportunities inside an ancient site, it is not just pure strength that means that you will be the one who has the last laugh. He could not swallow this grudge. Since he could not match the other party, they would just have to defeat them in terms of contending for the treasures. Everyone felt uneasy, but since the Yin River Celestial King had spoken, they could only obey him. Otherwise, given they were all just second heaven or third heaven celestial kings, they would only be bullied here without the protection of the Yin River Celestial King. Humph, what is there to fear? The Yin River Celestial King remarked in displeasure, and led the way forwards. Ling Han was filled with enthusiasm, and walked on after him. Chapter 2600, Entering the Tomb. The others followed suit, and entered the ancient tomb as well. Though this burial mound looked like a hill from the outside, the passageway inside was only wide enough for around 5 people to pass through at the same time. Its height was around 3 meters, with stairs that led all the way down. This was clearly a hill-like burial mound, but why were the stairs going downwards? Everyone did not know what the reason was. In any case, this staircase was designed just like this, and their only option was to just walk onwards. It was very dark here, but it did not affect their visibility. As long as there weren't any unique regulations in place, pure darkness had completely no effect on celestial kings. There were a particularly large number of turns here. The staircase was only about 30 meters long at most, and then it was the end. They had to take a turn and continue downwards. After walking for a while, they suddenly stopped, and saw traces of blood on the ground. Celestial King blood, they immediately said. Celestial King blood was too unique, bearing a unique kind of pressure. Celestial Kings naturally could distinguish it with a single glance. A battle had taken place here, and a Celestial King had bled. Immediately, a strong feeling of alertness rose up in them. Had the Celestial King wounded here been attacked by someone else, or by something here? Inside an ancient tomb, it was possible that there were traps, formations, and monsters. If you were careless and rash in here, there would be no point in blaming others even if you really did die. You were purely asking for it. A few more turns later, there were more and more smears of blood on the ground. In fact, there were even cut off limbs. The scene was extremely bloody. Ling Han stopped, and picked up a few strands of black hair. This hair was very coarse, and definitely did not belong to a human. The Yin River Celestial King stopped suddenly, and said very impatiently, "Don't just stand around there. Let's go quickly." In the first place, he was already angered, and now Ling Han was actually loitering around here, which displeased him greatly. What's so interesting about it? Isn't it just a few strands of hair? A Celestial King asked. This was one of the Yin River Celestial King's lackeys. Since his master was angered now, he naturally had to take the chance to perform. Don't think that you have discovered some kind of clue. There are many beast-type Celestial Kings, another Celestial King said. Ling Han ignored them, and merely looked at the black hairs in his hands. They gave him a very strange feeling. I was talking to you. The two Celestial Kings that had previously rebuked him moved at the same time, grabbing out at Ling Han. Ling Han casually pressed down a hand. Peng, peng, the two of them were sent flying backwards, crashing heavily into the wall. Instantly, blood spurted madly from their mouths as half the bones in their bodies were shattered. "How dare you!" the Yin River Celestial King immediately shouted. Ling Han was nothing but one of Zhao Shuang's lackeys, and he actually dared to attack his people. This was too outrageously bold. "This way," someone suddenly called out, his tone filled with slight urgency. Everyone walked ahead, and saw that a small platform appeared ahead of a few steps on the staircase. There were strange seals drawn on the ground, and it seemed like a formation. Dead bodies lay all over this place. Actually, not many people had died, but this platform itself was not very large. Hence, now that there were 5 or 6 corpses lying around, especially when they had been ripped into pieces that were scattered here and there, they covered the whole platform entirely. Aside from this, there was also a bear-like monster. It was completely covered in black fur, and even had tentacles. It looked extremely disgusting. These are the people who had entered this place the earliest. The Yin River Celestial King did not have the time to call Ling Han to accounts. He frowned. Though he had only seen these people once, with the memory of a celestial king, he naturally would not forget anything or anyone he had seen before. They encountered this monster, then after sacrificing the lives of a few people, they still managed to kill it, young Shaoling also analyzed from the sidelines. Ling Han tossed out the black hairs in his hands, and they just happened to land beside that monster. In comparison, one would realize that these black hairs had definitely come from this monster. The battle was extremely intense. However, though we entered very late, our delay was also limited, yet already so many people have died here. This monster should be very vicious. With an ambush, it wounded one person, then it continued to retreat as it fought, and the great battle only took place here. After killing these people, it also killed itself. Everyone made their deductions, and had just about reconstructed the truth of the matter. Where did this monster pop out from? Zhao Shuang asked, his voice shaking. He was but a second heaven celestial king. If he encountered a sudden attack from this kind of monster, wouldn't he be just simply killed? We are not the first group. The ambushes that lie ahead should have already been activated, the Yin River Celestial King said. Entering later had its benefits as well, for there would be people who entered earlier helping them to avoid the traps ahead. He glanced at Ling Han, and did not continue to flip out. This place was already exuding an air of great danger, so it was not appropriate to cause internal strife at this point in time. It would not be too late to deal with this person in the future. Follow me, and be careful. He led the way ahead, and everyone followed behind him. It was very dark and dead silent in here. Whether it was their breathing or their footsteps, only the slightest effort could cause a very large sound. They continued to make turns endlessly. Not too long later, they discovered traces of another battle. Dismembered limbs lay all over, and they discovered the corpse of another black-furred bear monster not too far ahead. Near here, there was another small platform, and there were formation patterns drawn on it as well. However, none of them could recognize what it was. It seems like the appearance of this kind of monster is related to this platform. None of them were stupid, and they immediately came to this deduction. They continued to advance, and true enough, the third place where a battle had taken place was still nearby a platform. Some of them wanted to give up. It was too dangerous here, and even celestial kings had bled. They did not feel safe at all. They were all second-generation young masters, and knew how to contend with each other for their pride, but they had a greater fear of death. Who among them had really suffered before, and how many of them would truly have roamed the border between life and death before? Yet the Yin River Celestial King did not agree. He was filled with enthusiasm, determined to find the fated opportunity here. After walking for a while longer, they came to another small platform after a turn, but there were staircases heading downwards on either side of the small platform. In other words, there was now a fork in the path. Everyone looked towards the Yin River Celestial King to see what he would say. We go right. He chose a path. They went through the stairway on the right, and there was another fork in the path not long after. We'll take right again, the Yin River Celestial King squeezed out through clenched teeth. Forks in the path appeared endlessly, as if this was a labyrinth. However, everyone did not feel any changes in space. Thus, it should be that this was just a situation wherein there were a lot of forked paths, and not a genuine labyrinth. Otherwise, that would be too easy to break through. After a considerably long time, they finally reached the end. A burial chamber appeared here, and compared with the small hill-like burial mounds outside, it was pitifully small, but it was still the size of an average house. Right in the center of the burial chamber, there lay a stone casket. There wasn't the slightest bit of dust on this casket. Could it be that we have just bumped into the fated opportunity like this? Everyone exclaimed in shock. Ordinarily, if there were any opportunities inside a burial chamber, that would definitely have to be funerary objects. Those definitely had to be located inside the coffin. We open the casket. The Ain River Celestial King declared without any hesitation. To them, a dead Celestial King would also be fertilizer, so how could they possibly have any reservations about disturbing the dead? I'll do it. A second Heaven Celestial King leaped out, immediately going to open the casket. He had just laid his hand on the casket when whang, the whole stone casket suddenly shone. A seal lit up, blasting towards that Celestial King. Suppress, that second Heaven Celestial King roared, throwing a punch to meet the blast of the seal. Pung! The might of this seal was extraordinarily great. With a single strike, that second Heaven Celestial King was sent flying, and he crashed heavily into the wall. A fountain of bloody mist gushed out, and he fell from the wall. In an instant, he had become extremely weak. Chapter 26:01, Opening the Casket. There are restrictions. Zhao Shuang exclaimed. These naturally were pointless words. How could it be that it was a ghost that had attacked the man? The others could only muse inwardly due to their reservations regarding Zhao Shuang's identity, but the Ain River Celestial King and Yang Shaoling both tossed a disdainful glance at Zhao Shuang. You really are too cowardly. How humiliating. Zhao Shuang was completely unconcerned. After falling into submission to Ling Han, he no longer wanted any pride. It was enough for him to keep living. The restrictions are quite powerful too. The Ain River Celestial King walked forwards. Let me try. He, too, stretched out a hand to touch it. Wang, the casket lit up with magnificent brilliance once more, and it manifested into a seal that blasted towards the Ain River Celestial King. Pung! He took this blow head-on, and couldn't help but take a number of steps back, his expression appearing slightly ugly. Everyone now had a definite understanding of how powerful the restrictions were. The Ain River Celestial King could take the restrictions head-on, but it was also extremely straining for him. We cannot apply brute force, the Ain River Celestial King said. Everyone nodded in agreement. There were no prospects for applying brute force at all. But this also convinced them that there were definitely treasures concealed within this casket. Everyone gathered around, studying it closely. Restrictions were a branch off from formations, and to put it simply, formations were a manifestation of regulations. Thus, to celestial kings, there were no formations that could not be broken through in this world. The only difference was how much time it would take. They were very rushed. Though they were the first to find this place, it did not mean that others would not come here. But in truth, a very long period of time had already passed, yet still no other people appeared, which seemed quite strange. Ling Han was also studying the restriction. Though he was only in the fourth heaven, his mastery of regulations was not inferior to that of the Ain River Celestial King at all. Otherwise, Ling Han's battle prowess could not possibly have been so strong either. Additionally, he had also learned something else from Wally, to look at a problem from a different angle, and his rate of solving the problem would be faster with the combination of two angles. Otherwise, he would not have just used half a year's time previously to break through the restrictions laid down by the Azure Ghost Celestial King. Ling Han exerted time acceleration effects on himself. This was an ability that 99% of Celestial Kings could not possibly be equipped with. It was equivalent to him being 1,000 times faster than everyone else. Hence, only a day later, Ling Han had come to a conclusion. He moved, and pressed down a hand on the casket. Scram! The Yin River Celestial King moved. He was filled with displeasure. He was presently trying to break through the formations, yet Ling Han actually dared to disturb him. This really was outrageously bold. He thought too highly of himself. Ling Han clenched a fist and parried the blow. Peng, the power of the two clashed together, and instantly activated the restrictions of the casket. A ray of light shot out, splitting into two streaks which blasted towards Ling Han and the Yin River Celestial King, respectively. Peng, peng. Both Ling Han and the Yin River Celestial King were sent flying backwards by the restrictions. Everyone was greatly shocked. It was not surprising to be sent flying by the restrictions. What was surprising was how Ling Han had not been at a disadvantage when he had exchanged blows with the Yin River Celestial King previously. This was too inconceivable. What kind of monster was he? He could suppress the Yin River Celestial King, but he was at least a 6th Heaven Celestial King. You, a 4th Heaven Celestial King? Even if you have reached the peak stage, this is still extremely ridiculous, and cannot be believed. This person. Could it be that he was even more freakish than he? Yuan looked at Ling Han, a sliver of change taking place in his expression. His gaze also flickered, revealing fighting spirit. The Yin River Celestial King's expression wavered. He stared at Ling Han, his heart filled with shock and extreme disbelief. Just what kind of monster was this? Yet Ling Han did not continue to make a move. He walked forwards, and began to break through the restrictions. These restrictions were not too complicated. Thus, he only took a short while to break through them. Then, the lid of the casket was lifted by his hand. At this moment, everyone could not be concerned about anything else. They all gathered around, stretching out their heads to look. There was a corpse that lay within the casket. It had long since turned to bone, and it was dressed in a suit of armor. However, obvious wounds could still be seen. A number of holes had been torn in the armor, and the bones that corresponded to these holes had also shattered. He should not have died by the immortal's tribulation, but should have rather been killed by an external force. His palms lay crossed upon his chest, and a sword lay beside him. This was a very long sword, and had no sheath. Though his corpse was already corroded, this sword was still glinting brightly. Though it was already broken into halves, it was exuding an incomparable chill. Aside from this, there was nothing else in the casket. Everyone was incredibly disappointed. Where were the treasures they were anticipating? Though this sword looked to be very sharp, it was definitely no celestial tool. Furthermore, it was broken, which made it even more meaningless. After exerting such great effort, all of that was for the sake of a look at this dead body? Who would be so idle to lay down such restrictions on the casket? Wouldn't they just be playing around? Let's go. The Yin River Celestial King humphed. He finally knew that his good luck was really not that good, and the reason why no one had come all this while was probably because there were no small number of such caskets. Everyone was busy breaking through the restrictions. Perhaps one of these caskets really did contain treasure. Chapter 2602, Elites Working Together. Previously, though Ling Han had been able to exchange blows with him once without falling into a disadvantage, that was because the Yin River had not used full power at all. Was there any need for him to use full power against a puny 4th Heaven Celestial King? Since Ling Han dared to challenge the Yin River, then he could just die. The Yin River Celestial King strode towards Ling Han. As he did, a black liquid was also flowing from within his body, intertwining on the ground and forming a web-like shape. Zhao Shuang was anxious, and hurriedly said, "We are all together. Whatever it is, we can talk it over peacefully. Just talk it over peacefully." If the Yin River Celestial King killed Ling Han, Zhao Shuang would not have any more antidote. In that case, Zhao Shuang would definitely die as well. But if Ling Han killed the Yin River Celestial King, then Zhao Shuang would have allowed his subordinate to commit the crime of actually daring to touch even the beloved disciple of the Azure Ghost Celestial King, and even Zhao Yuanyi would not be able to save him. Hence, what Zhao Shuang wanted the least was for the two of them to get into a fight. How could the Yin River Celestial King possibly take heed of him? He was determined to kill Ling Han. Previously, how the people from prosperous opening city had provoked him had already angered him greatly, yet he had no means to vent this fury. Now, even his own subordinate dared to leap out and publicly challenge his authority. How could he tolerate this? Kill, he definitely had to kill him. He moved. Wang, wang, wang. He shot out a palm strike, with 7 black seals solidifying, and he pressed them down on Ling Han. Boom, the liquid on the ground floated, solidified while maintaining a web-like shape, and became akin to a prison that trapped Ling Han within. Ling Han clenched his right hand into a fist, and punched out at empty air. A loud bang rang out, and the black liquid instantly collapsed. The prison crumbled. With a long whistle, Ling Han pushed forwards this fist to continue blasting towards the Yin River Celestial King. Pung! The two of them exchanged another blow, and Ling Han was immediately sent flying backwards. Meanwhile, the Yin River Celestial King clearly had the upper hand in terms of power. He was standing firmly, but his palm had already split apart, blood seeping from it. Looking back on Ling Han, the latter was completely unscathed. This meant that it was indeed the Yin River Celestial King that had the upper hand in terms of power, but it was Ling Han that was slightly superior in terms of destructive power. With this +1 and -1, it was hard to determine who had stronger battle prowess out of the two of them. One could only say that they each had their advantage, and this was a battle wherein the result was hard to predict. 9 Transformations Divine Scroll, everyone exclaimed in shock. That previous blow from Ling Han had used the 9 Transformations Divine Scroll, which boosted its destructive power, and that was how he had managed to wound the Yin River Celestial King with a single strike. Though it could not be considered even light injury, that was not because the 9 Transformations Divine Scroll did not have enough might, but rather because the gap in cultivation levels between the two was too wide. He has fused all 3 parts. This was what caused them the most shock. As it turned out, it was not he that was the only such monster. It had only been 10 million years, and Ling Han had already fused the 3 parts of 9 Transformations Divine Scroll. This was too terrifying. Who exactly are you? The Yin River Celestial King asked darkly. He did not believe that there would be so many freaks in this world, and it was always he that encountered them. Could it be? A name appeared in his mind. But even he did not dare believe it. This was really too outrageously bold, wasn't it? Ling Han broke into a grin, and dragged a hand down his face, revealing another face. Do you recognize me now? He asked. Li Long, everyone exclaimed in shock. This face was too familiar. Ling Han grinned. His features shifted, and he turned back to his previous appearance. Damn it, the Yin River Celestial King roared in fury. He moved once more, drawing from the regulations of water, and forming a black-colored spear, which he stabbed towards Ling Han. Flowing waters form my spear, penetrating all defense in this world. Ling Han had no intention to draw the divine demon sword. Previously, in the battle with the Yin River Celestial King, he had only been in the early stage of the 4th heaven, yet now he had attained peak stage. Moreover, he had also cultivated the 9 Transformations Divine Scroll, which had further increased his battle prowess. Now, he should possess the strength to battle a 7th heaven monarch tier, right? Ling Han raised his fist, and launched an assault against the Yin River Celestial King. Pung! 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 A great battle broke out between them. The space inside here was narrow and cramped. The moment they started fighting, the shock waves from their clash surged in all directions, which was extremely frightening, forcing Zhao Shuang and the others to have no choice but to retreat continuously. They were not even qualified to watch the battle from close quarters. Only Yuan was standing nearby. His eyes were burning brightly, and his hand was already involuntarily gripping his sword. In a battle of equal cultivation levels, Ling Han was the only one who had ever defeated him, and this caused his fighting spirit to blaze. He very much wanted to defeat Ling Han so he could prove that he was the true strongest prodigy of this era. Ling Han had no other thoughts in his head. His only thought was to battle. The Yin River Celestial King did not know why Ling Han did not draw the divine demon sword, but this naturally was more in line with his wishes. Otherwise, he was sure that he would definitely be no match for Ling Han. In the last battle, he had fought Ling Han to a tie. Actually, this made him feel very sullen. His battle prowess definitely surpassed Ling Han's. In fact, he overwhelmed the latter completely, but just because he lacked a celestial tool, he was forced to accept a tie as the result. Now Ling Han actually chose not to use his celestial tool due to his pride. Then, he could blame no one if he was seeking death like this. The Yin River unleashed his full battle prowess, wanting to force Ling Han to the point that the latter wouldn't even have the chance to draw the divine demon sword. Battle, 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 battle. The two of them unleashed their full battle prowess, fighting an extremely intense battle, and it was hard to decide who was stronger between them. Ling Han couldn't help but admit that a 7th Heaven Monarch tier was still very strong. Without using the divine demon sword, he would also be able to fight the other to a tie, but to completely suppress him? That was simply impossible. Right at this moment, a flash of sword light streaked past, slicing out towards Ling Han. Yuan had made his move. He was definitely not a despicable character that would take advantage of others, but rather he had no concept of rules at all. Since his fighting spirit was blazing hotly, then he would just attack. As for a fair one-on-one battle, this kind of concept had never existed in his mind. He would not object to others ganging up on him, and now that he was working together with the Yin River Celestial King to fight Ling Han together, he would not feel the slightest bit apologetic either. Now that Yuan had joined the battle, the pressure Ling Han was under instantly soared. Yuan was a monarch star, and a supreme monarch star at that. His evolution index soared directly to 11. This meant that his natural talent in cultivation was astonishing. That was clear from the moment he attacked. He had fused all 3 parts of the 9 transformations divine scroll together. This had even surpassed the majority of 9th Heaven Celestial Kings. With the boost of a heavenly venerable tier technique, the might of his sword technique was extremely frightening. Thankfully, he had only obtained 3 parts of the divine scroll after all. While that was still strong, it had not reached a level that could not be matched. Ling Han was unafraid. On the other hand, his heroic spirit and excitement burst out. Regulations entwined his fists as he clashed fiercely with the 2 great elites. But no matter how strong and fierce human power was, there was still a limit. The combined might of Yuan and the Yin River Celestial King had already surpassed Ling Han's limit, suppressing him gradually, and he had fallen completely into a disadvantage. Though they had the upper hand, the Yin River Celestial King did not look to be very happy, because he was feeling a tremendous amount of pressure. Ling Han, Yuan, all of them had natural talent that crushed his. Previously, he had been self-content and smug. He was an extremely rare monarch tier of Ghost King City, but now with this comparison, he was practically trash. Yuan's natural talent in cultivation was indeed awesome. After being defeated by Ling Han, he did not become despondent and lose his fighting spirit. Instead, he learned from the lesson and compensated for his own shortcomings. His battle prowess had become even more terrifying than before. Furthermore, he had also reached the peak stage of the 4th heaven, and his rate of advancement was not much slower than Ling Han's. The 2 great elites worked together, especially Yuan, who was extremely proficient in attack. This was his faith. Only when the power of attack was strong enough that he could completely overwhelm his opponent would there be absolutely no need to worry about defense, because he would definitely not be hit. His was a sharp sword, which posed a serious threat to Ling Han. Chapter 2603, Ling Han's Might. The Yin River Celestial King was arrogant, but he wasn't stupid at all. Seeing how Yun's attack was so powerful, he took the initiative to decrease his offensive force. He was now mainly responsible for defense, not only for himself, but also for Yun, so that Yun could proceed without reservations. This combination of attack and defense allowed Yun's battle prowess to be fully unleashed, further suppressing Ling Han. Sword light flashed, and blood spattered. This time Ling Han got injured. Yun's sword was too fast and too sharp. As long as he remained unsuppressed and with his full battle prowess unleashed, he really was a nightmare for any opponent. Ling Han continuously sustained injuries, and there was blood everywhere. In order to attack unrestrained, they kept on moving while still engaged in fighting. They came to a small platform, which was relatively more spacious. There was a formation drawn on the ground. How was it drawn? Instead of using a brush, this part of the ground was concave. Therefore, when blood was spilled on the ground and naturally flowed into the grooves of the formation, the entire formation suddenly appeared to come alive. When the formation was completely filled with blood, it suddenly emitted a glorious light, and a creature appeared out of nowhere, a black bear-like monster covered with tentacles. This kind of monster had appeared again. Ling Han experienced a strange feeling as the aura emanating from this monster felt so familiar to him. Shua, as soon as the monster appeared, it waved its tentacles and attacked Ling Han, Yun, and the Yin River Celestial King. Ling Han humphed, avoiding the attacks of Yun and the Yin River Celestial King, and then threw a punch at the tentacles of the black monster bear. Pung! With just a single punch, the tentacles of the black monster immediately burst. They could not even withstand a single blow. However, the tentacles turned into countless pieces that scattered outwards in all directions. Ling Han activated the source power to shield himself from these pieces. Who knew what these things might be? He absolutely did not want them to touch him. On the other side, the Yin River Celestial King also unraveled the attack of the black bear monster. Meanwhile, Yun didn't waste one bit of energy. With a slash of his sword, he attacked fiercely. The black bear monster made another move, and it was another attack directed at Ling Han and the others. For Yun, the attack didn't matter anyway, since the Yin River Celestial King would subdue it, but for Ling Han, it was akin to having one more opponent. He was already in a disadvantageous position, so an additional opponent naturally increased the pressure on him. Moreover, the formation continued to operate, and another black bear monster appeared. Ling Han shouted furiously. He already fully understood the level of his strength, so there was no need to continue being beaten down on. The divine demon sword was drawn. Wang, a cold light flashed, and sword chi surged out. Pooh! 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 Even this incomparably strong wall could not withstand the sword chi of the divine demon sword, and there immediately emerged countless marks several inches in depth. Ling Han started to counterattack. Pooh! The sword chi swept out, and the black bear monster that had just appeared was immediately cut in half. This kind of thing had no concept of defense at all. Its destructive power was terrifying, but it had zero defenses. As long as one's battle prowess was overwhelmed, killing it was relatively simple. As soon as the sword was drawn, it could no longer be hindered. The divine demon sword slashed again. Pooh! The first black bear monster was also cut in half. Ding! Ling Han's sword clashed against Yun's sword, and Ling Han saw a small particle immediately appear on his opponent's sword. The divine demon sword was so sharp, how could anything that was not divine metal be able to withstand it? But Yun's sword was also remarkable, it was not snapped in a single slash. Yun's ability to adapt was astonishingly fast. When his sword was parried in one slash, he immediately retracted the sword and stabbed again. Ding! 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 He stabbed with his sword several hundred times in a row, but this offensive was completed in only an instant. This required the support of extremely powerful body art. Yuan's body art might be incomparable to Ling Han's, but compared to other celestial kings, he was absolutely much stronger. Ling Han returned like for like, blocking every one of Yuan's strikes with great speed. Die, the Yin River Celestial King shouted as he, too, attacked, wanting to use this chance to kill Ling Han. He concentrated the regulations of water, which took the form of a black dragon that pierced towards Ling Han. Ling Han stared coldly at the Yin River Celestial King, his gaze full of disdain. Are you even worthy of being my opponent? He could regard Yuan as an opponent, but the Yin River Celestial King? He really wasn't worthy of it. No matter how strong his battle prowess was, he was not worthy of Ling Han's notice. He exclaimed softly, and directed his attack towards the Yin River Celestial King. The divine demon sword glowed. This was an object that surpassed any celestial weapon. Although it hadn't reached the level of Heavenly Venerate tool yet, its power was unparalleled. Just the sword chi alone was extremely terrifying, and it could pose a great threat even to Celestial King-level defense. How would the Yin River Celestial King dare to face it head-on? He had already suffered once before. Thus, he instantly took multiple steps backwards. Yuan kept on attacking, but Ling Han was actively channeling the indestructible Heaven Scroll. For a short period of time, his defense was comparable to that of divine metal. Therefore, it didn't matter how many times Yuan cut him. Ling Han set his eyes on the Yin River Celestial King. He was going to kill this person. The Yin River Celestial King blocked the attacks. However, a Ling Han who didn't have the divine demon sword in his hand was no weaker than him. Now with Ling Han wielding a celestial tool, how was the Yin River any match? He had blocked several attacks, but was already severely injured. He gritted his teeth, and immediately turned around with the intention to run away. As for Yuan, he couldn't care less. Do you think you can run? Ling Han unleashed the regulations of space, pressing down with his left hand. Bang! The Yin River Celestial King seemed to have crashed into an invisible wall. Although he smashed through it, his speed was greatly reduced. Ling Han caught up and continued to deliver sword strikes. With the boost of the 9 transformations divine scroll, the divine demon sword became even more terrifying. The Yin River Celestial King shouted loudly. He was unwilling to die here. He was a monarch tier, and he had a great chance to become a 9th heaven Celestial King in the Celestial King graveyard. There was even a chance for him to become a heavenly venerate in the future, although this chance was extremely slim. How could such a prodigy die here? He wanted to escape. He would not come out again until he had attained the 9th heaven of the Celestial King tier. How would Ling Han let him go? All kinds of regulations were continuously used by his hands. The flow of time slowed down, the space was frozen, and gravity was like a mountain. It reached the extent that the Yin River Celestial King had no chance to escape at all. Despite Yuan's attacks being equally fierce, the activated defense of the indestructible Heaven Scroll caused Yuan to be unable to do anything against Ling Han at all. Unless the sword in his hand was replaced by a celestial weapon, he couldn't pose a threat to Ling Han's physique. The Yin River Celestial King gritted his teeth and turned back around. Now he could only go all out in the fight, otherwise he would really die here for sure. Die. He rushed towards Ling Han, believing that Ling Han's defense couldn't be so perfect that it could last indefinitely. As long as he survived this wave of Ling Han's attacks, he would be able to join forces with Yuan to suppress Ling Han again. This wasn't a bad idea, but he had overestimated the strength of his force combined with Yuan's, and underestimated the power of Ling Han and the divine demon sword. Ling Han strongly suppressed the attacks. Every time the divine demon sword slashed out, it would cause blood to spatter like a fountain. What was the divine demon sword? It was a celestial tool, and was even proceeding in the direction of becoming a heavenly venerate tool. Its destructive power was too terrifying. Being slashed by it was definitely not as simple as sustaining physical injuries. The terrifying murderous aura would actually invade all parts of the body. The Yin River Celestial King coughed up blood. The divine demon sword had already damaged his internal organs to bits and pieces, and he could not help but vomit blood. He was in great pain. He had a feeling that if he continued to fight like this, he wouldn't need to be struck down by divine demon sword at all, as all the accumulated injuries he sustained could cause him to die at any time. Why hadn't Ling Han's defenses dissipated yet? The person I want to kill won't be able to escape, Ling Han said menacingly. Chapter 2604, Interception. To the Yin River Celestial King, these words sounded like they were filled with mockery. Previously, when he had moved to save Tang Yuan in Ghost King City, Ling Han had said similar words as well. In the end, Ling Han had killed Tang Yuan right in front of his eyes. And now, Ling Han said these words yet again. The Yin River Celestial King's fury could not be restrained, yet he could not show the slightest bit of temper. His only wish was to save himself. He moved out with full power, fighting for his life. Within 10 moves, I will take your life, Ling Han declared coldly, his voice carrying not even the slightest sliver of emotion, yet being filled with absolute certainty. The eyes of the Yin River Celestial King spat flames. Previously, He had also said that he could defeat him in 10 strikes, and now Ling Han was saying that he would kill him in 10 moves, which filled him with incomparably fury. In the eyes of these two, was he really that weak? He was not weak. He was not weak. He was not weak. The Yin River Celestial King roared in rage. He struck madly, wanting to prove that he was not that weak. 1 strike, 2. 9 strikes, and he was left with the last move. Pooh! A flash of sword light streaked past. Ling Han withdrew his sword, and the Yin River Celestial King stumbled. He lowered his head, looking down at his chest. A bloody hole had appeared there, and it was located at the precise position of his heart. The divine demon's sword had pierced one of his vital points. The Yin River Celestial King's expression was filled with confusion. He raised his head to look at Ling Han. He wanted to open his mouth and say something, yet could not say a single word. He collapsed onto the ground, signs of life rapidly leaving his body. True enough, killed in 10 strikes. Ling Han turned his head to look back at Yuan, eyes menacing. The pressure he was emanating was extremely frightening. An ordinary fourth heaven celestial king would probably experience a breakdown when being the target of such eyes. Yet Yuan was completely unaffected. Neither did he become shaken and lose his determination because of the death of the Yin River Celestial King. With a loud battle cry, he delivered a series of stabs with his sword. His power was still violent, and merely concentrated on attack, and not on defense, as if he was fighting for his life. Ling Han laughed loudly. He charged out with the divine demon sword, and clashed forcefully with Yuan. Ding! 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 The sound of swords clashing continued endlessly. The two of them exchanged blows, but after only about 100 strikes, the two of them clashed one more time, and the sword in Yuan's hand shattered, turning into thousands of pieces. For a non-celestial tool to clash head-on with the divine demon sword for such a long time was something considerably extraordinary. Ling Han's sword stopped, halting at Yuan's neck. "Why do you not kill me?" Yuan asked. As long as the divine demon sword continued just a slight bit further, with the destructive power of a celestial tool, his vital signs would be instantly extinguished. Ling Han withdrew his sword. "I anticipate how you will mature and battle with me." Facing a bloodthirsty psychopath like the Yin River Celestial King, Ling Han naturally would kill him without any mercy. Yuan, however, could only be considered a battle-thirsty madman, and it would be a pity to kill him. There would come a day when this kind of person could attempt to break through to the heavenly venerable tier, and he deserved a better end. Even if he was to die, he should die on the battlefield against Hysteria, and not in this celestial king graveyard. Yuan stared at Ling Han for a while, and then said, "I will definitely surpass you." Ling Han laughed loudly. "To surpass me is not something that can be done with mere words. Yuan nodded, and withdrew his sword before striding off. He decided that he would focus wholeheartedly on polishing his sword technique in the future before he considered anything else. Ling Han walked up the steps, but realized that Yang Xiaoling and the others had long since disappeared without a trace. True. They had all discovered that he was Li Long, so how could they dare to stay behind? No matter how many lives they had, it was not enough for him to take. Of course, that was with the exception of Zhao Shuang. He was poisoned, and thought that his life was still grasped in Ling Han's hands. Naturally, he did not dare to leave. Ling Han walked over, and patted Zhao Shuang's shoulder. You can go now. Zhao Shuang thought that he was being sarcastic, and hurriedly shook his head endlessly. Brother Long, what are you saying now? How could I possibly betray you? His expression was filled with loyalty. Ling Han raised a fist. If you still aren't going to scram, I will crush your head into bits. With this threat from him, Zhao Shuang's face turned pale in terror. He quickly turned around and ran off. Internally, he was naturally in great panic. Without an antidote, wouldn't that just mean death, only a few days later? He ran for a while, and naturally did not want to just give up like this. He hurriedly returned to find Ling Han again, but what trace of Ling Han was there left? He felt apprehensive, but after 3 days, he discovered no changes had taken place in his body. He was still alive and kicking by the 4th day, and finally realized that he had fallen for Ling Han's trick. Ling Han had already said before that he had not had any eternal antidote. Zhao Shuang had initially thought that was just a joke. He had not expected that it was actually a fact. Ling Han indeed did not have an eternal antidote, because Zhao Shuang was not poisoned at all. Zhao Shuang was very furious as he had actually been deceived by Ling Han for more than 10 million years, but upon further thought, the person he had been facing was Ling Han, the most notorious bringer of calamity of Ghost King City. To be able to spend so much time with him and still be living, wasn't this great luck already? With such thoughts, he immediately felt at ease. He decided that he would return to being a well-behaved second-generation young master when he returned, and never play around again. Ling Han walked slowly, searching everywhere for caskets. There were some caskets which already had their restrictions unraveled. There were some that had not, but the weapons inside hadn't been taken at all. They were neither celestial tools nor divine metal. Moreover, they were damaged. Who would actually want them? Ling Han was pleased. He toured one burial chamber after another, and his spoils were really heavy. Several days later, he had finally completed a whole tour of this tomb, and opened all the caskets. Then, he very happily came out. He had just walked out of the large tomb. When he arrived outside, he saw that a group of people were just standing guard at the entrance. Weren't they from prosperous opening city? Ling Han's eyes swept over them, and saw that one of the second-generation young masters of Ghost King City had fallen into their hands. Ling Han did not know his name. He had not even bothered to remember. Li Long? He walked out, his hand holding the collar of that second-generation young master. Ling Han stood still, and asked, "How can I help you?" Haha. He tossed that second-generation young master into the air, and then shot out a kick at him. Pang, that second-generation young master turned into a cannonball, careening towards Ling Han. Ling Han sidestepped, and that second-generation young master instantly crashed into the wall behind him. The sound of bones breaking rang out in succession. He turned into a mush of flesh and blood, sliding down onto the ground. The young master had not suffered. When he had kicked him, the latter had already been killed by the terrifying force. A great celestial king had died in such a lowly manner. This was the celestial king graveyard, where there was not much difference between celestial kings and stray dogs. Or should I call you by another name? He withdrew his foot. Ling Han. Ling Han was internally shocked. How did this person know his name? What do you mean? He asked calmly. No need to deny it. How many people are there in this world that can battle a 7th heaven celestial king while he is only a 4th heaven? He scoffed. Even in the world's paramount martial academy, there is probably no other person. There is only you, a man who has such heaven-defying body art. Ling Han looked at He, and then suddenly broke into a grin. That's right. I am indeed Ling Han. With a thought, his appearance changed, and he regained his real appearance. He asked calmly, the three of you should be from the martial academy, right? Otherwise, it was impossible that they would know so much about him. Furthermore, the feeling that the three of them gave him was extremely strong. He had even defeated the Yin River Celestial King within 10 moves. The former definitely was a prodigy of the highest tier of the martial academy. Ling Han thought for a moment and said, looking at the three of you, it is clear that you were waiting here to intercept me. In other words, you have a grudge against me. In the martial academy, there are only a numbered few supreme monarch stars in 6th heaven. You, probably are Gu Hei, right? He had a similar pronunciation, so He should be Gu Hei 1. Chapter 2605, Breaking Out of the Siege. He, or rather Gu Hei, couldn't help starting as his expression changed drastically. He had never imagined that Ling Han could manage to recognize his true identity despite pitifully little information. However, this was also normal. That was because after Gu Hei, Extinguishing, and Miao Hua had entered into the Celestial King graveyard, they had also rushed all the way to Prosperous Opening City after hearing of how freakish Ling Han was. That was because they deduced that the person who possessed such freakish battle prowess definitely could only be Ling Han. But when they arrived at Prosperous Opening City, Ling Han had already set out towards the ancient tomb. Hence, the three of them joined Prosperous Opening City, and set off together. Their goal was Ling Han. Thus, when they previously encountered the people from Ghost King City, they would ask about Ling Han. They were sure that Ling Han would definitely not give up on such a great opportunity as the ancient tomb. He would definitely find some way to sneak in. True enough, after they came, they saw those people from Ghost King City flee in panic. Capturing one of them and interrogating him, they found out that Li Long had appeared again, and thus stood guard at this entrance. Wang Dongsen and the others expressed no disagreement. They, too, wanted nothing more than to kill Ling Han. Ling Han, prepare to die. Gu Hei naturally would not expose his identity in full public. He merely laughed loudly, and then attacked. His strength was much superior as compared to the Yin River Celestial Kings. He was capable of defeating a 7th heaven monarch tier within 10 moves. Even though he had used his ultimate technique, this still proved that he was indeed powerful. Gu Hei's battle prowess had definitely reached 8th heaven. His palm descended, and boom, even the skies were trembling. This was a terrifying power that was close to the pinnacle power of regulation. Ling Han moved. He could face off against the Yin River Celestial King head-on, but doing so against Gu Hei still surpassed the maximum limits of his strength. Thankfully, his physique was very strong, so it would not hurt even if he was swept by a little of the aftermath. Gu Hei delivered several dozen strikes, yet Ling Han managed to dodge all of them. A Celestial King actually wanted to kill another Celestial King? This was a difficult feat. There was a gap of 2 cultivation levels between the two of them, but the gap between their actual battle prowess was a single cultivation level at most. Thus, the difficulty level of Gu Hei killing Ling Han was extremely high. However, Extinguishing and Miao Hua moved. They both walked out, forming a triangular formation, and surrounding Ling Han. Die. These two people moved mercilessly, wanting to kill Ling Han as soon as possible so they could directly extract his spirit. Every single one of them was stronger than Ling Han in terms of battle prowess, and the three of them working together was enough for an intense battle with a peak stage 8th heaven Celestial King. This was a crushing advantage, which brought enough difficulty for Ling Han. He was struck repeatedly, suffering multiple wounds. And this was still because Ling Han's physique had reached the 6th heaven in level. If it had been anyone else, even if their battle prowess had been equal to his opponents, they would definitely have been killed by now. With a ding, Ling Han drew the divine demon sword. Do you think you are the only one with a celestial tool? Extinguishing and the others sneered. When it came to powerful people like them, who had not previously traveled the most dangerous ancient sites, obtaining a piece of divine metal was no difficult matter. Naturally, they had long since obtained their own celestial tools. To say the least, even if their luck was too bad, and they never managed to get hold of divine metal, the Martial Academy would have given them a piece as a reward after so many years. Wang. 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 Frightening power surged out, and 3 majestic pillars of light shot skywards. Gu Hei and the others all drew their respective celestial tools, still having an absolute advantage. Wang Dongsen and the others were all watching this heatedly. They were all just second-generation young masters, and though the Celestial King graveyard had no shortage of celestial medicine, there was pitifully little divine metal. Aside from those that Celestial Kings had brought with them when they came here, there was basically no possibility that it could be discovered here. Hence, no matter how much they were favored, it was useless. Even when it came to 9th Heaven Celestial Kings, there were not many that had a celestial tool, what more Wang Dongsen's group. Now, seeing that Ling Han and the others all possessed a celestial tool, how could they not feel jealous? Extinguishing and the others were all supreme monarch stars. In fact, their evolution index was progressing towards 12. Not only was their battle prowess astonishing, their comprehension abilities were also incredibly frightening. They, too, had fused all 3 parts of the 9 Transformations Divine Scroll, and had used it in battle, greatly improving their battle prowess. Today, you must die. Extinguishing declared coldly. The 3 of them joined forces, sealing off all routes of escape for Ling Han. He definitely could not be allowed the slightest possibility of fleeing. Which of the 3 of them was not an absolutely strong prodigy? There had only been legends of how they had won victories against those with superior cultivation levels, yet not only were they using the superiority of 2 cultivation levels to battle a Celestial King 1 level lower now, it was the 3 of them working together at that. This was completely abandoning all pride. Undoubtedly, the threat this posed was too great. Ling Han was in a great crisis. The 3 of them working together were much, much stronger than the team-up of Yuan and the Yin River Celestial King, causing him to bleed very quickly. Furthermore, all 3 of them possessed their own celestial tools. If he was just struck once, it was definitely not something as simple as shedding a little blood. Things couldn't continue like this, or he would die. With a battle cry, Ling Han began trying to break out of the siege. You want to escape? Miao Hua struck out with his staff, forcing Ling Han backwards. If Ling Han still managed to escape even with the 3 of them combining forces, they would have no face to show themselves in the future. Ling Han laughed loudly. His fighting spirit was already fully ignited. What others considered impossible, he was determined to accomplish. Wasn't it just the battle prowess of 3 8th Heaven Celestial Kings? There was no way he could win, but breaking out of their siege was definitely no impossible feat. With a loud battle cry, Ling Han began to break out of the siege. As the divine demon sword slashed, he turned into a gust of wind, charging towards Extinguishing. Extinguishing couldn't help but rage. Ling Han had chosen him as the point to break out. Did he think that he was the easiest to deal with? Damn it. Fucking damn it. Die, he shouted in fury, and threw a punch, wanting to send Ling Han back. Yet Ling Han ignored this strike, and forcefully broke out. Pung. This punch from Extinguishing landed on Ling Han's back, but a light flashed out, and Ling Han was completely unharmed. Instead, he increased the speed of his charge with this punch. Ling Han had taken the initiative to channel the indestructible Heaven Scroll. His defenses now could not be considered to be at the level of divine metal, but they were definitely not something that an 8th Heaven Celestial King could harm. This damn defense. Extinguishing humphed. If Ling Han was allowed to simply break out and leave like this, the former would really be humiliated. With a soft exclamation, the spear in his hands pierced out rapidly, the might of a celestial tool fully unleashed. No matter how strong your physique is, what use is there? As long as it hasn't reached the level of divine metal, how could you be capable of blocking the sharpness of a genuine celestial tool? Otherwise, how could celestial tools possibly be so valuable? He started later than the others, and added with how he had helped Ling Han with a punch. There was no way he could have ordinarily caught up to Ling Han. He was aware of this fact as well. Thus, when the power of the spear was fully expended, he pushed forwards fiercely. Peng, the spear flew out of his hands, yet with a burst of 10 times the speed, it pursued after Ling Han. This strike was really, really too fast. If Ling Han continued on a straight course, he would definitely be struck by the spear, and if he veered off, that would definitely affect his speed, and thus allow Gu He and Miao Hua to catch up to him, and intercept him once more. However, Ling Han's reaction was something no one had expected. He merely twisted his body slightly. Pooh, the spear reached him. Even with his physique, it still could not be blocked. The tip of the spear instantly sank in, but it did not penetrate too deeply, and Ling Han did not even pause in his footsteps. Return. Extinguishing grasped at empty air, and the spear immediately turned around and returned, bringing with it a fountain of blood, which also caused Ling Han to stumble. However, Ling Han merely released a ferocious roar, and his speed only increased even faster, with him concentrating his full effort on escaping. In this way, Gu He and Miao Hua could not catch up to Ling Han. After he had run far enough, Ling Han turned his head, his eyes sweeping over the faces of Extinguishing and the others. His gaze was extremely cold, as if he was looking at 3 dead bodies. Chapter 2606, Another Great Battle. Ling Han did not say anything, but anyone who saw his expression could guess what he wanted to convey. And that was that he was definitely going to kill Extinguishing and the others. This seemed a bit amusing. Extinguishing and the others were all 6th Heaven Celestial Kings whose battle prowess soared directly into 8th Heaven Celestial King tier, and with their combined might, they could even match the battle prowess of a peak stage 8th Heaven Celestial King tier. To kill them, one had to possess the 9th Heaven's battle prowess at least, right? Yet Ling Han was only a 4th Heaven Celestial King, so what basis did he have for such confidence? But a chill rose up in the hearts of Extinguishing and the others, and even their souls were trembling. Why had they entered the Celestial King graveyard to snipe Ling Han? Firstly, they coveted the secret of Ling Han's powerful body art, and wanted to take it for themselves, and secondly, they were wary of Ling Han's potential. If they did not stop him, there would eventually come a day when he would surpass them. The 3 of them immediately strengthened their resolve. The more things were like this, the more they were determined to kill Ling Han. Humph, even if you have escaped our encirclement, so what? Where will you be able to escape with such severe injuries? Miao Hua asked menacingly. Even if we must chase you to the ends of the world, we will still kill you. Extinguishing expressed his stand on the matter as well. Die. Gu He's remark was very simple, but a single die also expressed his thoughts completely. Shio. The 3 of them set off in pursuit at the same time. Ling Han turned around, regulations of space spreading out. Wide-range spatial transportation could not be done here, but movement within a smaller range was still possible. At the same time, he was also causing trouble for these 3 great elites, slowing them down. There's no way you can escape. Extinguishing and the others locked their respective divine sense on Ling Han. Ling Han burst out in speed. Though he was inferior by 2 cultivation levels, his command over the regulations of space allowed him to possess even higher speed, and adding how there were many ancient graves here, with fog obstructing visibility, he soon threw the 3 pursuers off his trail. He entered into a large tomb, found a corner, and then entered into the celestial guest residence, where he immediately began healing his injuries. This time, his injuries were extremely severe, especially after that last strike when he was injured by the celestial tool. Though it missed his vital points, terrifying destructive power was still gushing in his body, and this caused 1/3 of his body to directly deteriorate. Not only that, this kind of deterioration was still spreading towards the rest of his body. If it were not for the fact that he had used source power to wrap around his heart, he would probably have died long ago. Ling Han ingested an alchemical pill. He did not tell the women about his present state, or the Empress might directly charge out to commit murder. That would be too terrible. Extinguishing and the others would definitely not harm the Empress, but the consequences would only be worse. Ling Han channeled the indestructible heaven scroll, wanting to remove the deteriorating power left behind by the celestial tool. The reason why celestial tools were celestial tools was their terrifying destructive power. Anything that was forged from divine metal would have this kind of ability, and the only difference was that after the celestial tool was forged, it could be activated. It could then battle by itself, unlike an ordinary weapon that was forged from divine metal, which definitely needed a user to wield it. Judging from the end result, with Ling Han sustaining this strike, whether it was a celestial tool or a divine metal weapon, the damage caused was more or less equal. The indestructible heaven scroll channeled endlessly inside his body, slowly expelling the destructive power of the celestial tool. The pace was really, really slow. Theoretically speaking, divine metal itself was already at the height of the 9th heaven celestial king tier. If one was struck directly, it would be equivalent to having been struck by a 9th heaven celestial king. However, the injury would not immediately explode, but rather cause damage slowly. Especially when the injury was in the proximity of vital areas. One could not completely remove the whole area, so this was extremely troublesome. Thankfully, the indestructible heaven scroll was the precious technique of a heavenly venerate that was superior to regulations. Even if Ling Han could not fully unleash the might of the indestructible heaven scroll due to the limits of his own cultivation level, he was still the source of its power, and the destructive power of a celestial tool was limited. As long as there was enough time, he would definitely be able to eliminate this destructive power. Ling Han exerted time acceleration effects on himself so he could shrink down the time needed for recovery. He spent more than 500 years, and in reality, around half a year's time had passed. Ling Han finally healed the injury caused by the celestial tool completely. Ling Han stepped out of the celestial guest residence. He wanted to accumulate the final bit of power through cultivation in preparation for breaking through to the 5th heaven, and he toured the large tomb at the same time, letting the divine demon sword devour enough divine metal so it could advance further. Whether it was Ling Han advancing into 5th heaven, or the divine demon sword advancing to the level of a heavenly venerate tool, it would allow his battle prowess to undergo a complete transformation. When he battled Extinguishing and the others again, he would not have to flee in such a sorry state. I will definitely seek a reckoning for this debt. Ling Han continued to open coffins within this large tomb. Every time he opened a coffin, he would apologize to the dead. After extracting the divine metal, he would carefully close the coffin back again. Having disturbed their eternal slumber, he felt guilt towards them. All of a sudden, Ling Han sensed an extremely dangerous aura, and immediately drew the divine demon sword, which he then raised before him. Xiao, a flash of sword light streaked past, slicing towards him, the sword chi shattering the heavens. Ding! Ling Han struck out with his sword, parrying this strike, but his figure was still forced backwards. Peng! He only stopped after crashing into the wall behind him. I have already said it before, there is no way you can escape. The person who had struck revealed himself. It was Guhi. He walked out, sword in hand and aura blazing. With his present battle prowess that was close to the peak stage of the 8th heaven, he was practically invincible here. How has he found me? This thought flashed through Ling Han's head, but he still chose to break out without a moment's hesitation. The walls here were too thick, which made the place a natural prison. In that case, as long as both Extinguishing and Miaohua both came here as well, Ling Han would really have no means of escape with one of them guarding a single passageway each. Hence, he had to break out before they managed to encircle him again. Channeling the indestructible heaven scroll, every strike he delivered was aimed at causing injury to both his opponent and himself. This caused Guhi to fall into a dilemma. His strength was indeed greater than Ling Han's, but he did not dare to let himself be struck even once by the celestial tool. Furthermore, Ling Han's battle prowess had also reached the level of the seventh heaven, so how could Gu Hei underestimate him? Gu Hei did not want to suffer heavy injuries himself when he killed Ling Han. Who could guarantee that Xiaoyingxiong and Miao Hua would not turn on him when they made their way here? This was the Celestial King graveyard. The dark side in everyone's heart would be exposed and boundlessly magnified. There were no rules or laws here, and it was very easy to go mad or psychotic here. And if one died here, who would pursue the matter, and how could they pursue the matter? Hence, Gu Hei was going to capture Ling Han, but he could not allow himself to be injured. At the very least, he could not sustain heavy injuries, as that would affect his battle prowess. With such reservations, it was difficult for him to intercept Ling Han. Furthermore, though this was not a labyrinth, there were truly a considerable number of crossroads. Ling Han very easily grabbed hold of this, and he took this chance to charge out. Gu Hei hurriedly set off in pursuit, fire burning in his heart. Ling Han actually managed to escape again. But what could Gu Hei do? Ling Han had grasped the indestructible heaven scroll. It allowed his physique to become incredibly tough for a short period of time, allowing him to trade injury for injury. With how Gu Hei also had his own reservations, how was he supposed to intercept Ling Han? He wanted to reap harvests, but he was not willing to sacrifice anything. How could there possibly be anything as good as that? Ling Han moved quickly. There were really too many turns in the stairway here, which greatly impacted his speed. He did not know how long he had circled around for. He had just made another turn, when a staff suddenly swept out towards him, bringing with it an incredibly terrifying force. Miao Hua's figure appeared as well. There was a cold smirk on his face. From the look of things, he had already discovered Ling Han, yet had not appeared immediately. Instead, he had been lying in ambush here. That was indeed quite sly. Chapter 2607, Unstoppable. Had Ling Han been under normal circumstances, Miao Hua would never have been able to ambush him, as the latter would have discovered the former's presence in advance. However, the current circumstances were unusual because Ling Han was running with great haste and more focused on Gu Hei, who was tailing him, resulting in his divine sense falling short of optimum condition as would have been under normal circumstances. Furthermore, Miao Hua had completely suppressed his aura for the sake of this ambush. Naturally, it was impossible to effectively guard against it. Ling Han only reacted when the staff swept towards him. At this time, it was already too late to turn his body around or even parry. Ling Han humphed as he channeled the indestructible heaven scroll, and golden seals immediately appeared on his body. Pung! Violently struck by the staff, Ling Han was predictably sent flying and slammed heavily against the wall. Under the impact of the terrifying force, the surface of the wall concaved, and the entire large tomb was shaking violently. This strike from Miao Hua's staff was so terrifying that even such a hard wall was ruptured. On the other hand, this also proved the sturdiness of the wall. The blast by someone with 8th heaven battle prowess merely left a crater on the wall. This was truly unimaginable. Ling Han groaned and continuously vomited blood. However, he didn't hesitate and dashed forward. Still thinking of escaping? Miao Hua sneered. The power of his strike was already expended. Still, he loosened his left hand's grip on the staff, and delivered a palm strike towards Ling Han. Wang, 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 his palm kept getting larger and larger with each strike. Flames rose, instantly turning this place into a volcanic cave. Ling Han's clothing immediately caught fire. It was made of celestial king tier fur, but so what? It burned at a speed visible to the naked eye, revealing the skin underneath. However, that was it. Ling Han's hair was still jet black, with a crystalline sheen, and was not at all burned by the high temperature. This was only natural, since his physique strength was at the level of 6th heaven. Had Miao Hua landed a palm strike directly on him, then even Ling Han's physique would not have been able to bear it. However, this was merely a sliver of the flames Miao Hua surged out, so it was naturally impossible to hurt Ling Han. Boom! A palm strike was delivered with great momentum. Ling Han let out a battle cry, and countered with a sword slash. Shua, the sword light radiated gloriously. Pooh! That big palm was immediately cut into halves. Nothing could stand against the sharp edge of a celestial tool. Miao Hua humphed coldly and withdrew his left hand, only to see a shallow wound dripping with blood on his palm. Fortunately, it was only injured by the sword chi, not directly slashed by the celestial tool. He channeled his cultivation technique, and the bleeding immediately ceased, and the wound was healed. Detestable guy. Miao Hua gritted his teeth. Having been struck by his staff, Ling Han definitely should have sustained several broken bones and severe injuries to internal organs. Miao Hua didn't expect Ling Han still had such powerful battle prowess to fight back furiously. This kind of guy whose will to fight became stronger when the situation became more dangerous was absolutely annoying. Just like when facing a trapped tiger, Miao Hua could not be negligent, or it would be disastrous for him. Xiao, Gu He arrived at this moment, and the two looked at each other with surprised expressions. Despite two great elites hunting him down, Ling Han still managed to escape. This young man was indeed outrageously freakish. After him. The two set out together, and chased after Ling Han. If Ling Han managed to get out from this large tomb, the area outside would be wide, and the fog would additionally make it difficult to see, which would then allow him to escape easily. Therefore, Ling Han had to be taken down here. Ling Han, you are a prodigy of the martial academy with your name existing on the Eternal Stone. Don't you even have the guts to have one battle? Miao Hua said, naturally doing so to cause disturbance to Ling Han's mindset. Gu He also said, we promise to give you a fair chance to fight. Just pick one of us, and as long as you can endure 1,000 moves, we will never seek you again. Ling Han ran with great haste, a sneer at the corner of his mouth. Naturally, he could not believe even a single word from both of them. Fair? Had they been fair, then how could they have teamed up to snipe him, and even used a sneak attack? From this moment on, both of you should cherish every day, because there isn't much time left for you guys. Ling Han said coldly. Gu He and Miao Hua were furious. This brat was indeed too arrogant. Did he think that he was the only one making progress, while the two of them ceased to progress? Admittedly, Ling Han had more potential than them, but even if he was to surpass them, it was not a feat that could be achieved within a short period. They were also a little puzzled. Since Miao Hua had already joined Gu He, why hadn't Extinguishing appeared yet? If Ling Han were allowed to run at this rate, he might escape. But it was as if Extinguishing had completely vanished. He never appeared, allowing Ling Han to get out of the large tomb. Taking advantage of the fog, Ling Han escaped from the other two. This made Miao Hua and Gu He furious. They couldn't help but scream out to the sky with such booming sound that its intensity even caused the surrounding fog to temporarily disperse. At this moment, Extinguishing appeared. Why have you come so late? Miao Hua and Gu He demanded at the same time with extreme dissatisfaction. Extinguishing's eyes were somewhat glazed. His eyeballs were covered with a layer of black stuff. After a pause, his eyes immediately returned to clarity, and he said, I found out something, so I was delayed. What can be more important than taking down Ling Han? Miao Hua humphed. Extinguishing countered, if we can crack the secret of that thing, it absolutely will not be any less valuable than Ling Han. Oh. Miao Hua's and Gu He's eyes lit up at the same time. Then let's go take a look. Ling Han ran for a while before swiftly entering the celestial guest residence again for healing. Previously, he was almost stabbed in the heart by a celestial spear, while this time he was struck by a celestial staff. He had several broken bones, and his body was currently being destroyed by an acute murderous chi. The level of indestructible heaven scroll is still not sufficient. If I can advance it to the indestructible celestial king physique, then it will not be so difficult to fight against a celestial tool, or if I can cultivate the indestructible divine metal physique, then with a body akin to divine metal, there is no need to fear any celestial tool at all. Ling Han sighed deeply. However, after advancing the indestructible heaven scroll to such a level, one would need a massive quantity of resources to progress a step further. Thinking about it, the karmic life Heavenly Venerable had also cultivated the indestructible heaven scroll only after reaching the Heavenly Venerable tier due to his limited strength. Where could Ling Han get such a quantity of resources? It was already a miracle that his indestructible celestial king physique was in fact superior to his own cultivation level now. Another half a year had passed in real time, and Ling Han had completely healed the injury caused by the celestial tool. How did those three find me? Ling Han pondered this question. He hid himself in celestial guest residence for half a year without incident, but he was sniped as soon as he appeared. It seemed that the trio had a special way to locate him. Perhaps they planted something on me during the first battle, and even heaven-deceiving technique couldn't cover my tracks. However, celestial guest residence was made of divine metal, which surpassed their means. After all, their battle prowess is merely at the level of the 8th heaven. Ling Han made such a hypothesis, but he nevertheless ran out without hesitation. He had escaped from the overwhelming danger posed by the three elites, where his life had been on a thread and being bombarded by celestial tools. Despite it being extremely dangerous, it also made him gain comprehension continuously. He believed that he could completely strengthen his foundations this time, thereby getting ready to attempt the breakthrough to the 5th heaven. He wanted to confirm his guess, and sat on the top of a large tomb to see if Miao Hua and the others would rush over swiftly. Sure enough, within half a day's time, 3 people came out of the fog. Who else could they be if not Miao Hua and company? Chapter 2608, Strange Turn of Events. Ling Han was just about to speak, yet was slightly taken aback. At present, Extinguishing and the others appeared to be a bit strange. Their eyeballs were covered with a layer of black stuff, and there was an indescribably strange qi emanating from their entire bodies. Ling Han couldn't help but feel chills. It was a bit like the black bear-like monster from before. Yes, although the form was completely different, there was something identical in terms of the aura. Ling Han, have you come round? Are you planning to surrender your life? Extinguishing sneered. He stood upright, exuding strong confidence, as if he had the guts to battle even a 9th heaven celestial king if one was to stand in front of him. Your life will end by our hands. Miao Hua also said. Gu Hei didn't spout any nonsense. He had always been cultured and refined, but now there was an indescribable ferocity to him that made one shudder. The trio spread out into a triangular formation to surround Ling Han. Naturally, Ling Han wouldn't let them succeed. He had confirmed his hypothesis that the trio had a special means to track him. With a battle cry, the divine demon's sword appeared, and he directly broke through their encirclement. You can't run away. Extinguishing laughed loudly. He struck with the spear he gripped in his right hand, while his left hand pressed at the empty air in Ling Han's direction, and a terrifying pressure immediately enshrouded Ling Han. Ling Han felt a kind of pain in his head, as if he was being poked by countless needles, which made him want to faint so that he would no longer suffer such pain. He couldn't help but feel startled. After all, his spirit had been refined through the indestructible heaven scroll, so how could he be this weak? Ling Han, I've really overestimated you before. Extinguishing instantly struck with murderous intent, stabbing his spear towards Ling Han. In front of me, you won't even survive a single blow. Ling Han blocked with his sword, and the spear was parried with a ding. However, a terrifying force reverberated, pushing him backwards. You're only in the 4th heaven. Extinguishing said disdainfully, and swept out with his right hand again. A black seal appeared in the palm of his hand, shaped like a hexagon, and it was pressed towards Ling Han. Inconceivable. In reality, only half a year had passed. How could Extinguishing's battle prowess have increased so much? This thought crossed Ling Han's mind. Extinguishing's cultivation level had not changed, and even his power had not changed as well, but he had mastered a method that could cause huge spiritual damage. It was as Ling Han possessed the advantage of body art over others, which directly allowed him to defy the heavens. Although Extinguishing wasn't as freakish, he had also raised his battle prowess to a higher level. Now just he alone boasted the battle prowess of the peak stage of the 8th Heaven Celestial King tier, completely overwhelming Ling Han. Pung! Ling Han channeled the indestructible heaven scroll, took a blow from Extinguishing head-on, and then used that impact to speed up to escape the encirclement. Humph! Miao Hua struck with his spear while delivering a palm strike with his right hand. The terrifying pressure assaulted Ling Han, causing him to have a splitting headache. The trio seemed to have mastered some kind of secret technique which granted them the ability to cause lethal damage against the spirit. Ling Han gave out a loud roar, and used teleportation. Peng, 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 his body forcibly broke through the space, and instantly arrived a far distance away. The trio including Extinguishing did not pursue, but sneered instead. By practicing this secret technique, our battle prowess can still be increased. When we next meet this boy, we can easily take his life. His body art is very strong, so he can still help us improve to some extent, although this isn't very important now compared to the means we currently possess. The trio were full of confidence, knowing that they could not catch up to Ling Han, so they simply gave up the chase. Ling Han ran for a long time before entering the celestial guest residence again. This time, it only took him half a day to recover. After all, he had not been directly struck by a celestial tool. What did those three guys encounter? Their spiritual attack is so terrifying. Though we have merely exchanged 1 or 2 blows, I have a feeling that their personalities seem to have changed as well. They have become incredibly bloodthirsty and sinister. What secrets are hidden in this large tomb? Ling Han was extremely apprehensive of Desolate Moon having such resolve to spread the amazing technique of a heavenly venerate. If the latter wasn't the #1 nicest person in the world, then he had to have an incredibly huge plot. Would there be any good people in the Celestial King graveyard? Maybe there were, but they were definitely limited, otherwise they would be devoured whole by others. Therefore, Desolate Moon had to be the latter case. He was plotting something extremely big. Ling Han really couldn't think of what the other party was plotting that he could be so generous. Ling Han left the celestial guest residence, and started wandering around, but didn't enter any large tomb so that it would be easy for him to escape in the event of any unusual circumstances. After moving about for a while, the trio including Miao Hua did not rush over to kill him. Instead, he encountered 2 groups of people engaging in battle. He didn't know why the 2 groups of people clashed, but the battle was extremely fierce, and they all used techniques similar to that of Extinguishing and company. The changes they had undergone were more obvious than those of Extinguishing and company, with black qi emanating from their entire bodies, as if they were demonic killers. Ling Han was suddenly startled. Wasn't this somewhat similar to the black bear-like monster? If they had tentacles growing out of their bodies, then there really wouldn't be any difference. Had they been subtly changed by this place? No one had noticed anything strange, because they were still seeking treasures and engaging in battles. Why am I not affected as well? Ling Han checked himself. There wasn't any black substance covering his eyeballs, and of course he didn't possess any power to cause spiritual damage. He thought about it carefully. Was it because he spent a large portion of time in the celestial guest residence? Or that he cultivated the indestructible heaven scroll, a body art created by a heavenly venerate, which could greatly increase the strength of one's spirit? He felt an alarm go off in his heart. Such a method that could alter the personalities of the trio including Extinguishing was truly terrifying. Could this be Desolate Moon's plot? Was he intending to turn everyone here into bloodthirsty lunatics? Although everyone in the Celestial King graveyard was bloodthirsty, as if they were psychotic, everyone still cherished their own lives after all, with each having their own plans. The formation of the different forces was clear evidence of this, otherwise everyone would just form one single group together. Still, what benefit would this bring to Desolate Moon? Why would a Celestial King do something so meaningless, letting everyone here exterminate one another until everyone was wiped out? What good could Desolate Moon gain from this? Brahman celestial flower? Ascending dragon pill? While Ling Han was analyzing it, the battle between the two groups of people had ended, resulting in the complete annihilation of one side. No one escaped. It was as if everyone had gone mad. The winning side was only left with 3 people standing. They turned their gazes towards Ling Han, with black light flashing in their eyes, and exuding a terrifying chill. Without hesitation, they rushed forward to attack Ling Han. Ling Han humphed and rushed out, throwing 3 punches in a row with loud ping noises. The 3 of them were crushed by him. 3 spiritual attacks were launched by the trio, causing Ling Han to feel a slight stinging sensation. He was startled. The highest cultivation level of these 3 people was only 3rd heaven at most. Logically, it should be impossible for him to feel anything from their attacks, but they actually made him feel a slight stinging sensation, which didn't bode well. It seems that everyone here has become stronger. Ling Han realized that black chi was rising from the 3 people's bodies and floating towards him. He flew upwards, swiftly retreating 100 meters, but the black chi continued to float towards him like a shadow. What the heck is this? Ling Han no longer tried to evade it. He was too curious, and wanted to test it on himself. Chapter 2609, Central Area. Ling Han stretched out a finger. As if drawn to it, those 3 streaks of black chi instantly darted in through the tip of his finger. At that moment, countless seals flashed in front of Ling Han's eyes. Great Tao appeared in front of him, yet it seemed unlike any other regulations that he cultivated, granting him appreciation. But at the same time, he felt mentally unbalanced. Out of nowhere, he had grasped some kind of means that could attack the spirits of his opponents, and cause terrifying damage. So this was how Xiaoyingxiong and his company had gained that technique to cause spiritual damage. Ling Han had a feeling, or even yearning, and that was to kill even more people. The means he had grasped would become stronger and stronger. In fact, he would be able to kill even a 9th heaven celestial king, turning the latter into a soulless body. He was suddenly shocked. If he fell under the control of this kind of impulse, would he still be himself? However, the longing for strength was so powerful that even he felt like he could just barely suppress this urge. Ling Han took a deep breath. No wonder Xiaoyingxiong and the others had been affected, even with how freakish they were. That was because this corresponded to the yearning of a cultivator at the deepest level, and that was to become stronger. For people of the Celestial King graveyard, what else could be more normal than bloodshed and slaughter? There was no need for them to be affected. They had always been killing and causing bloodshed, so what if they killed some more? Ling Han entered into the celestial guest residence. He was going to expel the influence of these murderous emotions. The moment he entered into the celestial guest residence, Ling Han involuntarily felt himself relax. It seems like the whole environment is affecting me, but this black-colored chi has a more obvious effect. Celestial tools can effectively block off this effect, so I have relaxed considerably after entering here. This should be the reason I was not affected even after so long. Ling Han sat down cross-legged. Indestructible Heaven Scroll surged out, allowing him to maintain a clean mind. I am who I am, and I will not be affected by external factors. Over a dozen days later, Ling Han stood up. He condensed water vapor, which turned into a mirror. He studied his eyes carefully in the mirror. They were bright and calm, without the slightest bit of malevolence. I should have successfully dispelled it, but the whole environment will still exert some influence. I cannot stay outside for too long, or I will definitely lose myself slowly. This is a subtle influence making use of one's mentality and yearning to become stronger, a gradual invasion. However, after I dispel the black chi, I will not be able to use this kind of spiritual attack technique. It seems like this black chi is the source of its power. Desolate Moon. What exactly is he planning? Ling Han stepped out of the celestial guest residence, and decided to stay for the moment. Firstly, he wanted to see how this matter would end, and secondly, he still wanted the divine metal in this place. Added together, the divine metal here was not a small amount. He knew that the celestial guest residence could interfere with the tracking of Extinguishing and company, so he would move around for a while, and then enter into the celestial guest residence, which was a good chance for him to dispel the influence that the surroundings here had on him as well. It was like Ling Han was an outsider looking in. He saw countless battles turning this place into a genuine graveyard as a great number of celestial kings were buried here. In the blink of an eye, over a dozen years had passed. Ling Han had gone to more or less all the large tombs in the outer circle, and taken all the divine metal they contained. The might of the divine demon's sword had greatly improved. At this time, he turned his eyes towards the center of this area. Desolate Moon had brought practically all the ninth heaven celestial kings in there. Had they now obtained the so-called treasure here? Or had Desolate Moon planted an astonishing conspiracy, embroiling everyone here? I'll break through to the fifth heaven first, then go in and look around. Only after I reach the height of the fifth heaven will I be able to deal with being hunted by ninth heaven celestial kings. Ling Han prepared to break through to the fifth heaven, but he discovered that he had suppressed his cultivation level for too long, so he actually could not find the point to break through anymore. After several months, the celestial tree inside his body showed no signs of blooming flowers or bearing fruits. The more pressure he was under, the greater his motivation and the stronger his fighting spirit. But now he was having too easy a time, so his fighting spirit was also sluggish. He was actually unable to break through. I need a battle. He wanted to draw out Extinguishing and the others. If he had another battle, he would be able to use it to stimulate his fighting spirit, and break through to the fifth heaven. When he did not want to encounter Extinguishing and company, these three would appear like ghosts, but when he truly took the initiative to draw them out, it was like they had vanished into thin air. There was no sign of them at all. Could it be that they have already entered into that final area? Ling Han looked towards the fog. The visibility here was still extraordinarily poor. At most, he could only see within the range of a kilometer. I'll go in then. Ling Han changed his mind. At first, he had wanted to break through to the fifth heaven before entering the last area, but now it was necessary for him to enter in advance. Otherwise, there would not be any trigger for him to break through to the fifth heaven at all. He strode forwards. The fog in front of him dispersed. This was very strange as it only hid things 1 kilometer away from him. After walking for several days, an open space suddenly appeared ahead of him, revealing a great mountain. No, it was not a mountain, but rather a large tomb. A tombstone stood, tall and stretching into the clouds. There were words on it, Ancient Tomb. This was the ancient tomb then. Now that Ling Han had arrived here, the fog finally dispersed completely, and he could see the entire shape of the large tomb. Streaks of light swept out, emanating a pressure that surpassed regulations. This was the tomb of a heavenly venerate. This tomb was not built with any entry passageway, yet a hole had forcefully been blasted here. He was certain that it was the doing of Desolate Moon and the other ninth heaven celestial kings. So what if there was heavenly venerable tier pressure here? With the combined efforts of thousands of ninth heaven celestial kings, even a living first-tier heavenly venerate could be defeated, what more when this was just a dead heavenly venerate. However, though the tiger was dead, his intimidation still lived. With the vague pressure imposed by the heavenly venerable tier aura here, all celestial kings below the fifth heaven were still unworthy of entering the large tomb. They could only hover around outside. Battle after battle was breaking out, and there were people dying endlessly, yet this allowed the others to become even stronger. Ling Han cast an eye over them. Wherever he looked, he discovered that there was a layer of dark light over everyone's eyes, which exuded a chilling air. A delectable little guy. As Ling Han was observing them, he had also been discovered. A woman walked towards him, her hips swaying seductively. She was incredibly beautiful. Though a dark light was also shining in her eyes, it added a devilish air of temptation for her. Bringing with her a fragrant breeze, she still did not stop when she was 9 meters away from Ling Han. There was an intoxicating smile on her face. Shua, a cold light flashed past, and she suddenly moved. She was clearly delicate and dainty, but her weapon was actually a 9-meter-long saber, which she brandished in a slash towards Ling Han's head. Hu, the great saber whistled through the air, seal after seal lighting up on it. Ling Han instantly felt a great pain in his head, as if he was being pierced by needles. How detestable. Ling Han frowned. This woman was only a fourth heaven celestial king, and based on the battle prowess she displayed, she only had the aptitude of an emperor tier, yet she could actually cause him a stinging sensation. That kind of mysterious means was truly shocking. Without mercy, he sent out a punch. Pang, that woman was immediately killed. A sliver of black chi rose up, floating towards Ling Han. Mine. Mine. All of you, scram. Immediately, more than a dozen people pounced out, wanting to snatch this sliver of black chi for themselves. It was as if they had gone mad. Ling Han humphed coldly, and threw out a series of punches. Peng, 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 these people were all destroyed by his hands. With every person that died, a sliver of black chi would rise up. More than a dozen streaks of black chi wafted, flying towards Ling Han. Get lost. Ling Han shouted loudly. He did not need this kind of thing. This was not power that he had cultivated himself. No matter how powerful it was, he would throw it away like worn shoes. Chapter 26:10, Three Great Elites. The black chi would naturally not obey Ling Han. It still continued floating towards him. Ling Han shook his right hand, and threw a punch towards the black chi. Boom, the fist swept out, and these streaks of black chi all fluttered out endlessly, separating and dispersing. However, they immediately reunited. Furthermore, they were no longer separate streaks of black chi, but rather fused as one. Strangely, it was a fusion of over a dozen streaks of black chi, but it did not become thicker. It seemed to have sustained heavy injury from Ling Han's punch. But Ling Han knew very well that it was not that the black chi had been injured from his attack, but rather that it had become even more concentrated. The black chi surged out, darting towards Ling Han like a spiritual serpent. Ling Han drew his sword. Shua. The divine demon sword slashed quickly at the black chi. The black chi made a clear dodging motion, but this sword strike from Ling Han was too fast. How could it manage to dodge? Pang! His sword pierced through it, and the black chi instantly dispersed once more. However, after turning into a mist-like substance, it fused back again very rapidly, turning once more into a black-colored spirit serpent, and continuing on its course to wrap around Ling Han. Yet Ling Han revealed a hint of a smile. This time, it looked like it had again been wasted effort. However, he acutely sensed that the density of the black chi had lowered slightly. Though it really was just a slight bit. Ling Han delivered a series of strikes with his sword. Shua, shua, shua. This time, he did not wait for the black chi to gather again. The divine demon sword shot out repeatedly, endlessly slicing the black chi into bits, and in this process, the black chi was also gradually fading. After over a dozen breaths later, the black chi had finally faded completely and disappeared. After all, the divine demon sword was a celestial tool. Its destructive power far surpassed Ling Han's. However, if the people here saw how Ling Han was being so wasteful, they would definitely go mad with fury. This was the source of their strength he destroyed. This kind of wastefulness definitely could not be forgiven. Ling Han withdrew his sword. This black chi was truly stubborn. Even with the divine demon sword, he had to attack for such a long time. If it was his bare fists, perhaps he really would not be able to deal with it. Ling Han killed over a dozen people in a row, and finally established his authority. Though there were still a considerable number of people watching him in the surroundings, and they showed keen and eager expressions, they ultimately did not make a move on him. It was indeed true that the black chi would affect the personality, turning one bloodthirsty, but it could not completely alter one's intelligence. If there was the slightest bit of opportunity, these people would take the risk and make an attempt, but when the power gap was so large that there was absolutely zero chance, they naturally would not choose to die for nothing. However, it was not that there were no truly strong beings here. A man strode over. He was like a massive gorilla, his body about as tall as 3 meters, and his back was slightly hunched, with his extraordinarily large head jutting forwards. His tongue was lolling out of his mouth, measuring about a foot in length. It was red as blood, and he looked like a ghost that had died from strangulation. On another side, an old woman bearing a sword on her back also appeared quietly, dressed in cyan. And behind Ling Han, a young man in red walked out stealthily like a panther spirit. Not the slightest bit of fluctuation appeared in his aura, and he could not be detected by divine sense at all. He could only be seen by the naked eye. Ling Han's eyes turned cold. Do you guys wish to die? You are merely a fourth heaven celestial king, the gorilla said disdainfully. He strode out, his every step causing the ground to tremble, which emphasized his intimidating presence. With a ding, the old woman had drawn her sword. She rasped, "Your battle prowess is not too bad, though. Stealing your cultivation will have some benefits for me." Only the young man in red did not speak. He had extreme confidence in his stealth, and he was sure that there was no way Ling Han could sense him. Ling Han stood, his hands crossed behind his back. He had said all he wanted to say. The only thing left now was battle. Die. The large gorilla pounced first. His arms spread out, seal after seal lighting up on the surface of his body, and causing his skin to become metallic while reflecting light in a blinding manner. He leaped up high, his arms turning into twin hammers that pounded heavily towards Ling Han. Shwa! The old woman slashed out with her sword at the same time, its chilling light blazing. However, the most fatal attack still came from that young man in red behind Ling Han. He had already snuck to a spot less than 3 meters behind Ling Han. With a shake of his hands, a triclawed blade appeared in each of his hands, which he stabbed towards Ling Han soundlessly. The young in red revealed a cruel smile. Though his triclawed blades were not celestial tools, they had been forged from a precious metal that was inferior only to divine metal, so they were extremely sharp. Adding his own power, even an 8th heaven celestial king could possibly lose their life in a moment of distraction. He was an absolute assassin. Just as the triclawed blades looked like they were merely an inch away from Ling Han, he finally shouted loudly, "Die. The one who should die here is you." Ling Han suddenly turned his head, his divine demon sword stabbing out. Pooh! It directly pierced the forehead of the young man in red. This was a presence that surpassed celestial tool. Even a 9th heaven celestial king might not be able to block it when he was fully focusing on defense, what more when the opponent was just a 5th heaven celestial king. The eyes of the young man in red widened, his expression filled with disbelief. That smile from before was still lingering at the corners of his lips, making him look extremely bizarre. He could not believe it. How had Ling Han been able to discover him, a king of assassins? It should be known that the reason that he had been tossed into the Celestial King graveyard was because he had assassinated too many Celestial Kings, and there were some that had powerful backgrounds at that. This time, he had launched a sneak attack on a 4th heaven Celestial King when he himself was a 5th heaven Celestial King. No matter how he thought about it, there was no way he could fail, yet it was him being killed with a single strike from Ling Han's sword. How could he possibly believe this? How could he accept it? Ling Han smiled slightly. When you show off your stealth abilities in front of me, you are biting off more than you can chew. The heaven-deceiving technique that Ling Han cultivated had been modified by Wally. Even a first-tier heavenly venerate could not detect anything off, and correspondingly, Ling Han's ability of detecting stealth techniques had greatly improved. If this young man in red had attacked head-on, perhaps he would have been able to last a few moves from Ling Han, yet he just had to be too confident in his assassination techniques. He had not imagined that Ling Han could possibly counter at all, and that his counter would be so terrifyingly powerful. In truth, he had really not died for no reason. On the other side, the large gorillas and the old woman's attack also reached Ling Han. Ling Han did not even turn around at all. Pung! Pung! The two attacks reached him in succession, but a golden light appeared on his body, and blocked the attacks altogether. This naturally was the might of the indestructible Heaven Scroll. What? The large gorilla and old woman exclaimed in shock at the same time, their expressions filled with astonishment. They were affected by the black chi, but that only caused them to become more bloodthirsty. Their intelligence was not affected. This was too terrifying. 3 great fifth heaven celestial kings had joined forces and attacked Ling Han together, but not only was not a single hair on Ling Han's head harmed, this fourth heaven celestial king had killed one of them with a single strike instead. Ling Han turned around, showing a hint of menace. I have already told you all before, don't court death. With a tap of his foot and sword in hand, Ling Han attacked. The large gorilla and old woman both retreated repeatedly, but Ling Han's offensive was too powerful. They were not able to match him at all, and could only retreat. Die. They unleashed a spiritual attack. This move was very strong. Ling Han's movements instantly slowed slightly. Haha. The large gorilla immediately waved an arm and struck out at Ling Han. This was an extremely good opportunity. However, the old woman's figure swayed and moved, floating sideways. Her target was the black chi that had floated out after the young man in red had died. Pooh! Ling Han suddenly delivered a stab with his sword. The large gorilla was shocked. He thought that Ling Han had already been struck by his spiritual attack. He had not expected that Ling Han had only been baiting him. The large gorilla hurriedly tried his best to dodge, but the sword still pierced his left arm. Ga ga ga. The old woman cackled loudly. She had already swallowed that streak of black chi, and instantly felt that she had become considerably stronger than before. Chapter 26:11, Fighting Luo Fuming again. Everyone was bursting with shock. 3 great elites had joined forces to attack Ling Han, yet the result was one attacker dead and another injured. This young man's battle prowess was a little too terrifying, wasn't it? Ling Han smiled at the large gorilla, yet there was no emotion in his smile. It was as if he was looking at a dead body. I have already said before, don't court death. He tapped out a finger, and pressed down on the large gorilla. Ah, the large gorilla naturally knew that he had crashed into a hard wall, but how could he be willing to just raise his head and wait for death? With a loud roar, the means to cause spiritual damage was already unleashed by him, blasting out towards Ling Han. Wang! Ling Han felt a slight pain in his head. Even if he had already prepared himself, he had still been stung by this attack, though it was not very serious. It could not be denied that this kind of means was very astonishing. It was no wonder that so many celestial kings had fallen into the trap. For celestial kings, what could be more tempting than great strength? When the large gorilla saw that this attack was effective, he couldn't help but look pleasantly surprised. He put his 2 fists together, and pounded his fists down like they were a heavy hammer. Ling Han shook his head. Though this was effective on him, the large gorilla was only a 5th heaven celestial king. At most, it would only cause Ling Han a slight sting, but how long could this effect last? His finger paused slightly, but it immediately tapped down on the large gorilla with harsh, severe, and unprecedented power. Pooh! Though the large gorilla tried his best to parry, it was completely ineffective. Ling Han's strike forcefully pierced through his forehead, and he died. Everyone was once again rendered speechless. Was this really a 4th heaven celestial king? Killing 5th heaven celestial kings was like slaughtering chickens to him. He was indescribably strong. Yet the old woman snatched the black chi that floated out after the large gorilla died. She released a series of cackles. The power bubbling inside her body filled her with incomparable confidence and greed. She wanted to swallow more black chi so that she would become stronger. She set her eyes on Ling Han. Though Ling Han had killed 2 people in a row with a single sword strike and a tap of his finger, she was unafraid. That feeling of incomparable strength also numbed her at the same time. "Surrender your life to me." She flew out like a swooping bat, her arms spread apart. And while she was in midair, she opened her mouth. Wang! A sound wave blasted out towards Ling Han. The sound wave had not reached him, but a spiritual attack assailed him first. Because the sound blast was basically just a distraction. Ling Han felt a stinging sensation inside his head. He shook his head. The spiritual attack from the old woman was much stronger than that of the large gorilla just now, and she had only devoured the 2 streaks of black chi from the young man in red and the large gorilla. The increase in strength seemed to be extremely simple, so it was natural that one would become addicted to it. Ling Han smiled slightly. "I allowed you to snatch 2 streaks of black chi in a row merely to see how far your strength would increase. Yet the end results have truly disappointed me." He stretched out a hand, and pressed down on the old woman. Pung! The old woman instantly plummeted from the skies. She had been forcefully tugged down by an extraordinarily powerful force of gravity. She was astonished. How could one that had reached a height as she had be affected by gravity? The only thing that could affect her could be regulations. The grasp that this young man had of regulations far surpassed hers, and that was why a slight guidance of regulations was enough to cause her to plummet. Even if the old woman had already been affected by the black chi, which caused her to become irritable and bloodthirsty, when faced with an existence that was far stronger than herself, she still showed a hint of fear. Survival was the instinct of every intelligent being. As long as one still had intelligence, it would subconsciously take effect. The old woman shuddered. Judging from Ling Han's words, he had purposely allowed her to snatch the black chi. Furthermore, it had only been so that she could become stronger. What confidence! Not only did these words stun the old woman, the others in the proximity were also gaping, and experienced a deep feeling of confusion. No one knew the origins of the black chi. However, they knew that it could increase their spiritual attack power. In fact, it could increase their cultivation by close to a whole cultivation level. Who would not want this kind of good thing? Yet Ling Han was actually throwing it away like worn shoes. Who could accept this? Ling Han did not even spare a second glance. He merely pressed down on the air in the old woman's direction. Pa! The old woman was crushed into a mush of blood. He clapped his hands, as if he had done something that was negligible. Then, he swept an eye over the people around him. "This is the price to be paid for provoking me." Everyone lowered their heads. This kind of person was definitely a dragon of the 9 heavens. How could they match him? If there were other celestial kings that were at the 5th heaven and above, they could still use their superior cultivation level to suppress Ling Han, but now? Ling Han was the strongest here. So what if there were countless celestial kings? So what if the black chi would affect their minds? Faced with absolute power, these people had chosen to submit. Yet Ling Han was not very pleased. He had initially planned to use the old woman to help him break through to the 5th heaven, but he had not thought that the old woman would still be so weak even when he had deliberately given her an advantage. 5th heaven wouldn't do it, and 6th heaven would probably be just barely enough. It had to be a 7th heaven celestial king that could pose a great enough threat to him. Ling Han did not barge into that final large tomb rashly. There were many 8th heaven and 9th heaven celestial kings in there. Furthermore, they also possessed the terrifying means of spiritual attack. Ling Han wouldn't dare to guarantee that he would not pass out if he was blasted by this kind of being. His spirit might even be directly crushed. He observed from the outside, hoping that he would be able to find some clues. 1 day, 2 days, 10 days. Long. On this day, the ground suddenly trembled wildly, as if an earthquake was happening. Then, one figure after another shot out of various corners of the large tomb. Pung! One of them crashed down in the area near Ling Han. Looking at the extremely sorry state he was in, he had definitely not run out on his own will. He should have been forced or sent flying out here by another elite. Ling Han looked over, and couldn't help but look surprised, because he recognized this person. Luo Fuming, Luo Yang's father. When Ling Han had killed Luo Yang, Luo Fuming naturally wanted to avenge the death of his son, and had fought an intense battle with Ling Han. However, in the end, the latter had used the divine demon's sword to send the other party into retreat. A seventh heaven celestial king should be an acceptable opponent. Ling Han's eyes lit up, and he strode forwards. Luo Fuming scrambled to his feet, a hint of lingering fear flashing in his expression. He was seemingly filled with wariness towards this large tomb, but his greed could not be suppressed. Gritting his teeth, he planned to enter the tomb once more. Wait! Luo Fuming had not even moved yet when someone stretched out a hand in front of him, looking like he was stopping him. Luo Fuming looked over, yet almost scoffed out loud. A fourth heaven celestial king. A mere fourth heaven celestial king actually dared to stop him? Luo Fuming humphed internally, yet moved without the slightest hesitation, pressing down a palm on Ling Han. This kind of dumb bug should just be crushed with a single strike. His palm strike landed, and Ling Han raised his hands slightly. As regulations clashed, countless ripples formed. This attack from Luo Fuming was instantly dispersed cleanly. Luo Fuming couldn't help but be taken aback. Though this strike was not his full power, it actually was still unable to suppress a mere fourth heaven celestial king. This caused him to recall a person, the great enemy who had killed his son. That man, too, possessed the ability to battle others superior to him in cultivation level. But that evil brat was a third heaven celestial king. Furthermore, he did not have this appearance and this aura either. Who are you? Why are you stopping me? Luo Fuming asked darkly. The extremely terrifying aura of a seventh heaven celestial king surged out. Ling Han smiled slightly. Luo Fuming, do you no longer recognize me? You are. Luo Fuming frowned slightly. He did not recognize Ling Han, but felt that the tone the latter used was familiar. Chapter 26:12. Come. Ling Han smiled calmly, and then rubbed a hand over his face. You. Luo Fuming raged immediately because Ling Han had already turned into Li Long, in appearance, and his aura was also the same. Naturally, Luo Fuming instantly recalled the pain of losing his son. He laughed loudly, but it was filled with incredible menace. How bold! How bold! You actually dare to appear in front of me. Ling Han smiled. It was you fleeing in panic previously, wasn't it? Luo Fuming couldn't help but be struck speechless. Actually, he had not fled in panic previously, but rather could only leave reluctantly because he could do nothing against Ling Han who possessed the divine demon sword. But as a seventh heaven celestial king, he actually was unable to suppress a third heaven celestial king. So how could he bring himself to debate the issue with Ling Han? Today, I will definitely take your life. Luo Fuming declared coldly, filled with absolute confidence. Though Ling Han's cultivation level had increased, and Luo Fuming was still where he had been, so it seemed like the scales of victory were even more inclined towards Ling Han, Luo Fuming knew just how amazing the means of spiritual attack he had grasped was. Even the mind of an eighth heaven celestial king could be destroyed with a single strike from him in a moment of carelessness. As for a fourth heaven celestial king? He admitted that Ling Han's physique was extremely tough, but the spirit was the hardest to cultivate. Was there any possibility that it was indestructible? Ling Han clapped his hands together. What I want is this resolve from you, come. A seventh heaven celestial king should be the best opponent for him now. That should be enough to make his fighting spirit blaze, and allow him to break through to the fifth heaven. Pay back with your life for my son's death. Luo Fuming moved. He was shouting, releasing a world-shaking roar. Even if one had attained the seventh heaven celestial king tier due to the special conditions of the celestial king graveyard, whether they were king tier or emperor tier, the cultivation level was still genuine. How could their battle prowess be underestimated? Moreover, Luo Fuming's eyes turned completely black. He delivered a spiritual attack aimed directly at Ling Han's mind. This was the most terrifying attack. Even if Ling Han had prepared himself, it was useless. He felt a great tremor in his mind. It really was like a great wave emerging in the ocean, shaking him harshly. Right at this moment, Luo Fuming's attack also reached him. A palm strike approached, turning into thousands of streaks of force, and intending to render heavy injury to Ling Han. Ling Han forcefully repressed the agony in his spirit, and repaid Luo Fuming with a palm strike of his own. Pang! The two of them exchanged blows once. Ling Han couldn't help but stumble, and took a number of steps back. His expression also became extremely ugly. In terms of true battle prowess, Ling Han was definitely not inferior to Luo Fuming, but having the latter send a spiritual attack right into his spirit affected his ability to counter, causing Ling Han to be inferior to Luo Fuming in this exchange. Moreover, the spiritual attack also caused some slight injury to his spirit. A seventh heaven king tier was not fearful, but being influenced by the black chi, he had learned the means for spiritual attack, making him now a seventh heaven monarch star, and that was what was frightening. You can't even withstand a single blow. When Luo Fuming saw that this strike had taken effect, he couldn't help but laugh loudly. He approached again, sending out his fists in a series of punches, and multiple spiritual attacks were also embedded within his punches, bombarding Ling Han endlessly. Ling Han was not shocked, but rather overjoyed. He had deliberately walked out to challenge Luo Fuming, and that was because the latter could exert enough pressure on Ling Han, allowing his fighting spirit to soar, and thus helping him break through to the fifth heaven. Ling Han did not speak, and merely raised his fists to meet his opponent. The power of the 9 transformations divine scroll wrapped around his fists, causing his attack power to be greatly boosted. Pang! 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 The two of them clashed again. It was clear that Ling Han was at a disadvantage. It could not be helped. Luo Fuming's spiritual attack was not something Ling Han could block at all. It would be effective every single time, causing a sharp pain in his spirit, and thus affecting his battle prowess. Furthermore, this kind of spiritual attack would also have an extremely strong harmful effect on the spirit, and after clashing several thousand times, Ling Han felt like his head was about to explode. He had to think of some way to deal with this kind of spiritual attack. Otherwise, it was only Luo Fuming now, but what if he encountered Guhui, Xiaoxiong, and the company in the future? Sixth Heaven Supreme Monarch stars were themselves far stronger than Luo Fuming's type, and adding this kind of spiritual attack, Ling Han would be completely unable to resist. Even if he broke through to the fifth heaven, whereby his standard battle prowess allowed him to be unafraid of Xiaoxiong and the like, the spiritual attack was still a barrier that he had to think of some way to overcome. This Luo Fuming was his best sparring partner. Boom! Boom! They clashed endlessly. Luo Fuming naturally was unconcerned about clashing with Ling Han. He had the full upper hand now, and it was instead Ling Han that would suffer spiritual damage after exchanging a blow with him. Even if the damage suffered every time was extremely small, it would accumulate, and it was not impossible that it would build up to a point that Ling Han's mind would just explode. Die! 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 Luo Fuming roared harshly. Being affected by the black chi, he was already very bloodthirsty, and adding the grief after his son's death, he became even more berserk. Previously, Ling Han had also been influenced by the black chi. He knew how the spiritual attack was used, but after expelling the black chi from his body, he was no longer able to use this ability. All that was based on the black chi. Thus, the more black chi one obtained, the higher the grade would be, and the more terrifying one's spiritual attack would become. There was no way Ling Han would absorb the black chi. This thing was too malicious. It could influence one's mind, so he could only find some kind of solution through Luo Fuming. Previously, Ling Han had also repeatedly sustained this kind of attack, so it was natural that he had long since begun to ponder on a strategy to deal with it. His original method was using the indestructible heaven scroll to boost his spirit, but he discovered that this was completely useless. Even a heavenly venerate technique had no effect? No. Ling Han shook his head internally. Even divine metal could effectively block out the influence of the black chi, so how could the indestructible heaven scroll be inferior instead? This was because he had come to a new realm, where the various regulations were different from the celestial realm. After so many years, Ling Han had naturally long since made some adjustments to the indestructible heaven scroll so that the latter would correspond to the regulations in the flaming frost realm, but that was only in the aspect of physique. On the spiritual level, Ling Han still had not found the time to make adjustments, and it was only now, when he had become so passive due to the spiritual attacks, that he suddenly realized that he needed more improvement in this area. While Ling Han battled fiercely with Luo Fuming, he continued to draw on regulations, adjusting the indestructible heaven scroll, and strengthening himself in the aspect of his spirit. It should be known that Ling Han's opponent was a seventh heaven celestial king, a being who had grasped the means to deliver spiritual attacks. With him forced to multitask under such circumstances, his situation naturally worsened as he constantly wavered on the boundary of danger. But it was precisely this powerful feeling of crisis that forced out every single bit of potential from Ling Han. He discovered that the threshold on his cultivation level had loosened. The great doors to the fifth heaven were finally open to him. Furthermore, this was not the only piece of good news. He had also reached a new level in his grasp of the indestructible heaven scroll, and was presently rapidly adapting himself to the regulations of the flaming frost realm. After all, he had already adjusted his physique previously, so the difficulty of adjusting himself on the spiritual level was naturally considerably lower. Come! Come! He erupted in loud laughter, bold and lofty. You are already close to death, and you still dare to be arrogant? Luo Fuming sneered. This brat was really preposterous. He had already sustained several thousand spiritual attacks from him, and his spiritual attack was naturally injured heavily, and he actually still dared to laugh wildly? Ling Han ignored him completely. If Luo Fuming had not grasped the means to inflict spiritual damage, Ling Han would have been able to kill the former with a few blows. Now, Ling Han naturally would not take Luo Fuming seriously either. The other party was only a puppet that was being influenced by the black QI. Come! Ling Han shouted at the skies. Come what? Luo Fuming was just about to continue mocking when a feeling of anxiety suddenly rose up inside his heart. He raised his head, and could see dark clouds spreading out. Terrifying lightning bolts were flashing within. Fuck, it was a heavenly tribulation that was coming. Chapter 26:13, Breaking Through to the Fifth Heaven. Thunderclouds rolled out, and the heavenly tribulation was about to arrive. Lightning flashed within the thunderclouds, exuding a frightening aura that would strike fear even into the heart of a seventh heaven celestial king. Luo Fuming paled in shock. Ling Han was actually going to undergo a tribulation at this moment? This young man's strength was extremely powerful. As a fourth heaven king tier, he was capable of matching seventh heaven, and now he was going to undergo the great tribulation of the fifth heaven. Would the might of the tribulation be comparable to the eighth heaven? Clang, the first bolt of divine lightning had already descended. Ling Han was unafraid, and charged forwards with his fists raised. Lightning struck his iron fists, and the regulations of lightning exploded, creating boundless flashes of lightning, as if an ocean of lightning had been spilt. It was extremely terrifying. Dumbfounded, Luo Fuming was watching in shock. Though he knew that Ling Han was very strong, the fact that the latter was strong to this extent still struck him dumb with astonishment. He could not believe it. That was because Luo Fuming knew that it might be that he himself could bear this kind of tribulation, but he would definitely have to pay a massive price for doing so. Even if he was not severely injured, he definitely couldn't take the second blow and be completely unscathed the second time. But would a tribulation have only a single strike? It would barrage one for a whole day. Indeed, Luo Fuming had cultivated a secret technique, so his battle prowess had soared greatly, but that was when his target was other beings. If one used spiritual attacks on a tribulation, would the tribulation slow down even for the slightest instant? Hence, when faced with a heavenly tribulation, he was actually still the original seventh heaven Luo Fuming, without the slightest improvement. This kind of might from the heaven and earth made him tremble. Even if he was a celestial king, and was the same level as regulations. How could he dare to make another move? To say nothing of whether the might of the tribulation would be magnified due to his cultivation level after he was pulled into the tribulation, even if it was exactly the same, his only fate would definitely still be death. How is this brat so freakish, he mumbled, his expression extremely ugly. And in the surroundings, everyone was similarly popping their eyes out in shock. Heavens, what have I seen? A fourth heaven celestial king is actually capable of matching a seventh heaven grade elite. Moreover, he is even breaking through in the midst of battle. The might of this tribulation is too terrifying, isn't it? Why does it give me the feeling of a ninth heaven tribulation? In the thunderclouds, Ling Han was battling the tribulation intensely. To him, a tribulation was not hard to undergo. Thus, he drew the divine demon sword, and being tempered by the tribulation, he drew this terrifying lightning into the body of his sword. It could allow the divine demon sword to gain the power of lightning, and it was possible that the divine demon sword would be able to unleash the might of eighth heaven. This naturally was extremely difficult. How could the power of heaven and earth be stolen? Yet Ling Han was unconcerned. He was going to undergo a heavenly tribulation anyways, so even if there was just a single bit of benefit, that would still be pure profit. Crack. 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 The heavenly tribulation struck down endlessly, every single lightning bolt seemingly capable of crushing Ling Han into dust, but in truth, it was all unsuccessful attempts. Luo Fuming hesitated. Should he stay here and continue to wait until Ling Han had finished undergoing his heavenly tribulation, or should he leave immediately? Leave? He was not satisfied with that. The enemy who had killed his son was right in front of him, and he previously had also gotten the absolute upper hand in terms of battle prowess. But if he didn't, what if Ling Han finished undergoing the heavenly tribulation, and his battle prowess spiked, so he turned the tables to kill Luo Fuming instead? Hence, Luo Fuming was very hesitant, conflicted between two difficult choices. After hesitating for a very long time, his expression finally became determined. He had decided to stay. Firstly, Luo Fuming wanted to avenge his son, and secondly, Ling Han definitely had to be hiding some extremely great secret. Otherwise, there was no way he could be so strong. Luo Fuming was determined to snatch this secret for himself. If this had been before he'd entered into the ancient tomb, perhaps he would have chosen evasion as his best option. While strength was indeed great, his life was clearly more important. But now, he was affected by the black chi, and his greed could no longer be contained. Moreover, he had absolute belief in the might of the spiritual attack, and thought that once he used this move, Ling Han would definitely end up like how he had previously pummeled heavily and mercilessly. He sat quietly on the sidelines, recovering to his strongest condition. At the same time, he was also building power up for his strongest attack. Now, he completely had the initiative. Attack was only the matter of a single thought for him. He had more than enough time to prepare for a powerful move. His strongest move was the 3 evil bone needles. He would need to prepare for more than 10 breaths' time just to shoot out a single needle. In a battle of equal power, what time would he have to prepare for this attack? But now, not only could he shoot out the evil bone needle, he could even shoot out all 3 of them. Luo Fuming couldn't help but show a hint of pity in his expression. He had obtained these 3 evil bone needles in an ancient site before he had entered the Celestial King graveyard. They were extremely valuable, and had astonishing destructive power. He had also used them to assassinate several Celestial Kings whose cultivation level surpassed his, but every time he used them, a few more cracks would appear on the evil bone needles. He would probably only be able to use them one last time. This pity only flashed past on his face, and Luo Fuming quickly steadied his resolve. As long as he killed Ling Han, what he would gain would far surpass the value of 3 evil bone needles. To speak of nothing else, merely the celestial tool that this brat had was worth the sacrifice. Time passed quietly, and a day's time was just about to be over. Luo Fuming suddenly stood up. He raised his head to look. The tribulation clouds were dense, but no lightning was unleashed. Taking into account the factor of time, they were clearly building up for the final, as well as the strongest, blow. He set his eyes on Ling Han, his divine sense also locking down on the latter solidly. Once the last strike from the heavenly tribulation descended, Luo Fuming would also quickly follow up by shooting the 3 evil bone needles. In these circumstances, he really could not believe that Ling Han could still survive this safely. Clang, the last bolt of lightning from the heavenly tribulation descended. It was extremely grand, as if a lightning dragon had taken form, roaring towards Ling Han. At the same time, Luo Fuming also waved his right hand. Xiao, 3 evil bone needles were shot out. And that was not all, either. Luo Fuming was waiting. Once the heavenly tribulation struck down on Ling Han, Luo Fuming would deliver a spiritual attack. Otherwise, even if he interfered in the heavenly tribulation, nothing good would definitely happen to him. Ling Han smirked coldly. Luo Fuming had been waiting all this while at the sidelines, so how could Ling Han be unable to think that the other party was planning to snipe him after the heavenly tribulation? Ling Han flicked the divine demon sword, meeting that final lightning bolt from the heavenly tribulation. Then, he stretched out his left hand, and pressed down on the 3 evil bone needles. Regulations of time flared, and the 3 evil bone needles instantly slowed down drastically. A shadowy light dimmed and brightened, as if they wanted to pierce through the chains that the regulations of time ensnared them with. Luo Fuming was stunned. The evil bone needles were terrifyingly powerful. When he himself had been a 2nd heaven celestial king, he had used them to assassinate a 3rd heaven celestial king. This was definitely a precious tool that had been forged by a 9th heaven celestial king. Aside from 9th heaven celestial king tier, they should not be affected by regulations of any other level. Yet Ling Han actually made the evil bone needles stop. Just how inconceivable was this? This guy had only just advanced to the 5th heaven. Was he really that terrifying? However, Luo Fuming was only taken aback for an instant. Immediately, he delivered a spiritual attack against Ling Han. It surpassed regulations, or was another kind of regulations. It had no concept of distance at all. The moment it was delivered, the attack instantly blasted into Ling Han's mind. A hint of self-satisfaction appeared on Luo Fuming's face. Ling Han would definitely lose his control over regulations due to the effects of this blow, and even if it was just an instant, the evil bone needle would be able to stab towards Ling Han again. Furthermore, it could not possibly be blocked this time. Die. Xiao, the spiritual attack had already landed, but what shocked Luo Fuming was the fact that the 3 evil bone needles were actually still motionless. How is this possible? Luo Fuming could not accept this at all. This scene had completely overturned his common sense. Ling Han grinned proudly. It was not something as simple as a breakthrough that he had done. He had also completed the spirit cultivation part of the indestructible heaven scroll. This kind of spiritual attack was indeed still capable of affecting him, but when used by Luo Fuming, it was actually not much different than if it was used by that large gorilla and old woman from before. It would only cause Ling Han a slight stinging sensation for a while. This was completely within the range he could tolerate. Chapter 26:14, Smacked to death with a single strike. After faltering for a brief moment, Luo Fuming suddenly turned around to flee. Even his spiritual attacks couldn't affect Ling Han, so how could he possibly hope to rival the latter? When at the 3rd heaven, Ling Han had already been capable of rivaling Luo Fuming with the help of his divine demon sword. Now that Ling Han had advanced 2 levels compared to back then, how could Luo Fuming have even a sliver of a chance? Not only did he have no chance at victory, but he even faced the risk of death. He was bloodthirsty, and he was greedy. However, in the face of certain defeat and death, he naturally wouldn't be as foolish as to charge forward with no regard for anything else. Ling Han shook his head, saying, "It's too late." He reached over to grab at Luo Fuming. Boom! Like a lofty mountain, the regulations transformed into a corporeal hand that completely blocked all paths of retreat for Luo Fuming. No. There was shock and disbelief on Luo Fuming's face, and there was more so a sense of regret and resentment. Why hadn't he fled earlier? Why had he cornered himself into such a deadly situation? He wasn't that kind of person. A strong sense of confusion overtook Luo Fuming. He had always been a cautious person who refused to do anything he wasn't certain about. However, Ling Han had already been able to rival him while at the third heaven, and this was the case even though Luo Fuming had mastered powerful spiritual secret techniques. Now that Ling Han had surpassed the fourth heaven and entered the fifth heaven, why had Luo Fuming still dared to target the former? Why had he still been led astray by his greed? Even up until this moment, he still couldn't understand what it was that had affected him. His actions were in complete contrast to his usual behavior. Ling Han's palm smashed down. Pa! Luo Fuming was instantly crushed to death. Once his spiritual attacks failed to affect his opponent, Luo Fuming would be weaker than even the Yin River Celestial King. Meanwhile, Ling Han had already been able to kill the Yin River Celestial King while at the fourth heaven, so now that he had advanced to the fifth heaven, wouldn't killing Luo Fuming be as easy as the flick of a wrist? The surrounding celestial kings were all stunned upon seeing this. They couldn't help but tremble in apprehension. This fifth heaven celestial king was far too ferocious. He had managed to kill a seventh heaven celestial king with a single smack. His strength could already rival the eighth heaven, right? However, Ling Han simply shook his head. Following the rise in his cultivation level, he discovered that it became increasingly difficult to kill those who were at a higher cultivation level than him. Luo Fuming had only been an emperor tier, and if it weren't for this unique environment, it would have been impossible for him to reach the seventh heaven in the first place. Moreover, this kind of seventh heaven was as weak as could be. It was because of this that Ling Han had managed to kill him with ease with a single smack. However, what if he were a seventh heaven monarch tier? In that case, killing him would have been far more difficult. If others knew of his thoughts, they would definitely berate him for being greedy. He had already killed an enemy 2 levels above him, and this was already a heaven-defying feat, yet he was still disappointed and sighing that this wasn't good enough. Ling Han flicked through Luo Fuming's spatial celestial tools. However, there were only a few hundred ascending dragon pills inside them. This was naturally far inferior to the Azure Ghost Celestial King's wealth. However, this couldn't be helped. After all, Luo Fuming was only a 7th Heaven Celestial King. Ling Han sat down cross-legged, holding the Dimension Scroll in his hands. Now that the upper limit of his cultivation had been unlocked, he could naturally elevate the level of his body art again. He didn't know what other dangers lay in the ancient tomb, but he knew there would definitely be more challenges ahead. Otherwise, those 9th Heaven Celestial Kings would have already obtained the remaining scrolls of the 9 Transformations Divine Scroll and retreated from this place long ago. It was naturally good to increase his strength. Moreover, this wouldn't take much time anyway. Even so, Ling Han immediately fell silent after sitting down. In the blink of an eye, 17 years passed. During this time, some other celestial kings charged into the ancient tomb, unable to suppress their greed and lusting after some treasures. Many other celestial kings engaged in deadly battles outside, with their corpses littering the ground before the ancient tomb. Some other celestial kings also arrived and displayed their domineering might. However, no one stepped forward to disturb Ling Han. This was because his act of killing Luo Fuming with a single strike was still a hotly discussed topic among the others. Even though the newcomers were skeptical of this, they still decided not to provoke Ling Han, since there wasn't any real need to. After all, what if the rumors were true? However, there were always arrogant and cocksure people. What bullsh** tea are you spewing? A 5th Heaven Celestial King killing a 7th Heaven Celestial King? How can such a preposterous thing occur? A woman said in a silvery voice. She was extremely beautiful, yet her delicate face was filled with arrogance. Exactly. Why don't they claim that he killed a 9-heaven celestial king? Someone beside her said in agreement. This was a group of youths who appeared as profligate as could be. There were 9 people in total, 6 men and 3 women. Their strength was very similar, and they were mostly all at the 5th heaven. 2 of them were at the 6th heaven, 1 male and 1 female, and they were both wearing an aura of arrogance. Young Master Su is a monarch tier 1 in a trillion years, yet even he can only guarantee victory against those at the same cultivation level, a man in black said as he pointed his thumb at the man who was at the 7th heaven. Yet, they're claiming that this person managed to slay a 7th heaven celestial king while at the 5th heaven? Then what does that make of young Master Su? And Sister Qing? She's also a 6th heaven monarch tier, and she's destined to become a peerless 9th heaven empress in the future, another woman added. The man and woman who were praised both wore modest smiles. However, their expressions were as arrogant as could be, and it was clear that they completely agreed with these words of praise. They felt like they were indeed this powerful. A youth in purple strode forward, and said, "Who is that person? Come on out. I, Lu Yuheng, want to see what kind of 3-headed and 6-armed beast you are." He swept his gaze around, peering down at those in the surroundings. "What a haughty person," someone mumbled. "Shush. Hold your tongue. Don't you recognize these people?" his companion hurriedly said in warning. "Are they that impressive?" the other person asked in puzzlement. "They're young masters from Heaven Transforming City," his companion replied. Gasp. The Heaven Transforming City, the person exclaimed in astonishment. According to rumors, that place was founded by the first batch of celestial kings who were tossed into the Celestial King graveyard. It's also the first city of the Celestial King graveyard. His companion nodded, saying, "That's right. The Heaven Transforming City is brimming with elites, and there are more than 109th Heaven Celestial Kings in that place. Moreover, the first batch of Celestial Kings who were locked into the Celestial King graveyard are all genuine elites. Which one of them doesn't have a terrifying background? Which one of them isn't supremely talented? To say nothing of them, even their descendants are extremely powerful and talented. It's rumored that many of them are monarch tiers." "Monarch tiers," the first person exclaimed with a gasp. Even in the Flaming Frost realm, monarch tiers were few and far in between. Perhaps there would only be 1 monarch tier out of every 1 trillion people in the celestial realm, which made the 1 out of 100 million of the Flaming Frost realms seem like a lot. The title of monarch tier could explain everything. Similar conversations took place in many different corners. Even though their minds were all affected by the black energy, their most basic and primal sense of respect and fear still remained. Thus, none of them dared to provoke these young masters. Lu Yuheng peered down at the surrounding cultivators. Even though their voices were low, he could still hear them as clear as day. Their words caused him to feel incredibly smug. Their identity as members of Heaven Transforming City was extremely beneficial. He scoffed, and said, "Sure enough, this person is full of hot air. After seeing me, you don't even dare to step forward. Haha." He pointed to a random person, saying, "You. Tell me where that so-called freak is." The person he pointed to naturally didn't want to offend Ling Han. However, he had never witnessed Ling Han's might with his own eyes, and he had only heard about it from other people's descriptions. As such, he felt more threatened by these young masters from Heaven Transforming City. After hesitating for a brief moment, he pointed at Ling Han. Lu Yuheng looked over, only to see a person sitting cross-legged far in the distance. The space surrounding him was clear, and it was as if he were the moon being highlighted by the stars, and as if he were an emperor sitting before his subjects. It was as if his paramount might destined him to solitude. Chapter 26:15, Stomped to Death. As he looked at Ling Han, Lu Yuheng couldn't help but feel like a tiny ant. It was as if he weren't facing a 5th heaven celestial king, but a paramount ninth heaven celestial king instead. He hurriedly shook his head. He had come here to teach that person a lesson, to show everyone that it was preposterous to believe that a fifth heaven celestial king could kill a seventh heaven celestial king. After all, how could that be possible? Yet, he had actually been frightened by this person? How embarrassing. Yuheng, why are you standing there like a fool? Perhaps you're afraid, a person behind him said with a chuckle. This person was Lu Yuheng's companion, and he had discovered Lu Yuheng's minuscule change in expression. Lu Yuheng instantly flared up in rage, shouting, "Why would I be afraid?" He glared at Ling Han, and shouted, "Brat! You still dare to remain seated after seeing me? Have you grown tired of living?" Even though Ling Han had been extracting energy from the dimension scroll this entire time, he wasn't actually in a state of seclusion. Instead, he could stop whenever he wanted. It was just that he didn't want to stop. He swept his gaze over Lu Yuheng before saying impatiently, "Piss off." Ha 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 ha. Ling Han's reply drew a round of laughs from Lu Yuheng's companions. Lu Yuheng, this person doesn't think much of you. You've seriously embarrassed yourself. You were actually berated by some random nobody. They joked and laughed, and this caused Lu Yuheng's expression to become increasingly dark. Initially, he had only planned to teach Ling Han a lesson. Now that he was being taunted by his companions, a burst of killing intent instantly flared up in his heart. You're truly seeking death. He resolutely lashed out, with his hands summoning the great Tao of Earth and forming hundreds of meteors that viciously crashed down on Ling Han. Lu Yuheng is growing more and more powerful, the man at the sixth heaven said. He was called Huan, and he enjoyed the highest status out of the 9 people. His words carried a sense of critique, and it was clear that he viewed himself as superior to Lu Yuheng. This myriad star storm technique is Lord Lu Sun's trump card. Even though Lu Yuheng can't even replicate 1/10,000th of its true might, it's still an extraordinary technique among those at the 5th heaven, the woman at the 6th heaven remarked. She was called Zhao Qing, and her background was similar to that of Su Huan. However, her cultivation was slightly inferior. Hee, it looks like Lu Yuheng is truly enraged, someone said with a chuckle. Who told you guys to provoke him? A young woman scolded. Many of the men shook their heads, and said, well, that brat was seeking death anyway, so he can't really blame anyone. They had only just entered this area, so they still hadn't been affected by the black energy yet. However, as descendants of the elites from Heaven Transforming City, they naturally didn't attach much value to human life. So what if this person was killed? Who told him to be so unlucky? Boom! Several hundred meteors crashed down, with each being as powerful as the full power strike of a first heaven emperor tier. This was naturally terrifying, and the surroundings were instantly obliterated and flattened. Dust and rocks flew into the air, forming a gigantic mushroom cloud. He was killed just like that. With the rumors praising him to the heavens, I thought that he would at least be more powerful than this. Who knew that he was actually this weak? Who the hell made up that rumor? Su Huan and the others viewed Ling Han with utmost disdain. In fact, even the surrounding cultivators felt like they had been lied to. What kind of elite was this? He was as weak as an ant. Utter trash. Lu Yuheng said softly as he clasped his hands behind his back. However, his words reverberated around everyone's ears. He was acting with arrogance and haughtiness. However, who told him to be so powerful? Whom are you calling utter trash? A crisp and clear voice said from amid the dust and rocks. Everyone looked over, only to see a young man striding forward, with the chaotic regulations unable to near him at all. This person was naturally Ling Han. What? Impossible. Good Lord. All their eyes widened in disbelief upon seeing Ling Han stride forward in a carefree and casual manner. Even Su Huan and Zhao Qing were slightly astonished by this. As sixth heaven celestial kings, they could naturally achieve this as well. However, Ling Han was only at the 5th heaven. Lu Yuheng faltered for a moment before descending into rage again. You merely blocked a single strike of mine. Is that anything to be proud of? He was fearless at this moment. After all, he still had Zhao Qing and Su Huan, two powerful elites. Moreover, he still had Heaven Transforming City, a colossal beast in this realm. Thus, what could a measly fifth heaven celestial king do to him? He lashed out again, drawing on the great Tao of earth as he made a grabbing motion. A fearsome halberd materialized in the air, and viciously thrust forward at Ling Han. Ling Han's eyes became ice cold. Even though he was aware that he was a magnet for trouble, he was truly innocent this time. He had been sitting there and meditating, so whom had he provoked? Right now, he was already at the fifth heaven. With his body art, power of regulations, and divine demon sword, it was entirely possible that his battle prowess could rival those at the eighth heaven. Even if facing those at the ninth heaven, he could still run away with ease and composure. Thus, did he still need to be afraid of anyone in this celestial king graveyard? If he didn't display his supreme prowess, were they all going to take him for a weakling? Ling Han unleashed a punch. Pung! The halberd instantly shattered into pieces, transforming into countless shards of regulations that shot into the surroundings. Pa, pa, pa. Several shards swept past Luo Fuming's face, instantly leaving several gashes. Blood flowed down his cheeks. Ling Han pressed his advantage, charging forward and throwing a strike at Luo Fuming. Luo Fuming was astounded. He tried to dodge, yet how could he possibly escape from Ling Han's grasp as a measly fifth heaven emperor tier? After all, he was no Ji Wuming or Xiaoing Xiong. Pung! Luo Fuming was smacked to the ground by Ling Han. He tried to crawl up, but his head was immediately pressed to the ground by Ling Han's foot. This foot was as heavy as the stars, and it rendered him completely immobile. He was both infuriated and humiliated. As the son of Heaven Transforming City Supreme Elite Lu Sun, when had he ever suffered such misery before? However, those who had witnessed Ling Han disposing of Luo Fuming before simply watched on with cold smiles. This person had already killed a seventh heaven celestial king with ease, so what trouble could a measly fifth heaven celestial king pose? They had already warned him about Ling Han's strength, yet he had still insisted on charging forward to get his face smacked. Was he not asking for a beating? However, many more people had only heard rumors about Ling Han's strength before. Now that they were witnessing it with their own eyes, they couldn't help but gasp and feel astounded. Su Huan looked up, with rage spreading across his face. However, he quickly suppressed his rage, and said calmly, "Release him. Then sever one arm and one leg. If you do so, I can forgive you." Did you hear? "Hurry up and release him," another person immediately shouted. Young Master Su doesn't always act so nicely. Don't miss this opportunity. Humph. Do you know who we are? Ling Han faltered upon hearing this. These people were far too arrogant. He looked at Su Huan with a faint smile, and said, "Are you commanding me? Release him. Don't force me into action." Su Huan replied calmly. Even though he had witnessed Ling Han's strength, he was still extremely confident in his own abilities. "Young Master Su, kill him. Kill this bastard." Luo Fuming shouted. "This person actually dared to humiliate me. I want him dead." Ling Han slowly raised his foot. Upon seeing this, everyone thought that Ling Han had chosen to yield. They all shook their heads. This can't be helped. After all, these are people from Heaven Transforming City. That place is filled with ancient elites, and it's said that each of them is powerful enough to massacre an entire city. If those people are offended, which force can withstand their rage? Even though the Desolate Moon Alliance, 10,000 Dragons Alliance, and Seasons Alliance are brimming with elites and power, Heaven Transforming City is definitely no weaker than any one of them. This is the smart choice. Fuck. Just as everyone was engaged in a spirited discussion, they suddenly saw Ling Han stomped down without any hesitation at all. Pa! Luo Fuming's head instantly cracked open like a smashed watermelon. Chapter 26:16, Soul Extinguishing Drum. Silence instantly enveloped the surroundings. No one could speak a single word. Everyone thought that Ling Han had yielded, not daring to provoke heaven-transforming city. In any case, this would have been the smartest choice. Heaven-transforming city was far too powerful. They were the oldest force in the Celestial King Graveyard, and they were founded by the earliest members of the Celestial King Graveyard. At that time, all of the Celestial Kings had possessed immense backgrounds so profound that they couldn't be executed. At the same time, they also possessed terrifying strength and talent themselves. It was rumored that they were all monarch stars. Thus, just heaven-transforming city alone could rival the Desolate Moon Alliance, the 10,000 Dragons Alliance, and the Seasons Alliance. Ling Han had brought calamity upon himself. He's dead meat. Who would have thought? He's actually this vicious. Vicious my A**s. That's nothing but recklessness. He's seeking death. Some admired Ling Han's indomitable spirit, while others shook their heads in pity. A fifth heaven celestial king yearning to challenge heaven-transforming city? Death couldn't befall him fast enough. Meanwhile, Su Huan and the others all wore ice-cold expressions. They were filled with rage. Ling Han actually dared to kill their companion before them? Damn it. Su Huan laughed with fury. Very well. Very well. I've never come across such a haughty person before. You've truly opened my eyes. Boom. He unleashed his aura, summoning numerous dragons that bellowed in the surroundings. In fact, the roars of these dragons could directly shock fifth heaven celestial kings unconscious. Boom. He strode forward, instantly causing the earth to quake. He was a sixth heaven monarch tier, with his vitality index reaching an impressive 11,000. This was a level that could almost rival ordinary seventh heaven celestial kings. However, how could there be other sixth heaven celestial kings present? All of them had already entered the ancient tomb to search for treasures. Thus, Su Huan's aura instantly knocked many of the nearby cultivators unconscious. Those slightly further away also swayed and stumbled, and it was as if they were all drunk. One had to realize that these people were all celestial kings. This was proof of Su Huan's immense power. Now that young Master Su has stepped forward, this arrogant brat is definitely going to die. Humph. He actually dared to provoke heaven-transforming city? Does he not know the meaning of death? We can't kill him just like that. We have to extract his soul and burn it with the myriad refining cauldron for tens of thousands of years. We have to subject him to a slow and painful death and force him to regret his decision to provoke heaven-transforming city. Zhao Qing and the others spoke with anger behind Su Huan. They weren't infuriated because of Lu Yuheng's death, but they were instead infuriated because Ling Han had dared to challenge the dignity and might of heaven-transforming city. You must die, Su Huan said. He strode toward Ling Han, with each step powerful enough to shake heaven and earth. He was a monarch tier, someone whose mastery of the great Tao was far superior to that of ordinary celestial kings. The spectators were all stunned. Just then, they had still been fully confident in Ling Han's abilities. Upon witnessing Su Huan's astonishing aura, however, they couldn't help but waver. Perhaps, this person was even more powerful. Ling Han remained unfazed and unmoving. Regardless of how the tsunami-like waves of aura surged over, he remained still like a colossal mountain that soared to the heavens. What did it matter that a tsunami was crashing over? If it struck him, he would simply send it back to where it had come from. Capture him. Su Huan finally lashed out, reaching out with his right hand. Boom. The regulations condensed, transforming into gigantic azure pythons that radiated with strength and might as they swooped down on Ling Han. Zhao Qing and the others sneered. Even if Ling Han were at the sixth heaven, he would still be easily captured by this technique. After all, Su Huan was a monarch tier. Pa. Just as everyone thought that Ling Han was facing inevitable defeat, they saw him stride forward and swing his hand, slapping Su Huan across the face. Su Huan directly flew into the air, opening his mouth and spitting out blood and teeth. Everything appeared simple and easy, like an adult bullying a child. Silence enveloped them again. No one could speak. This was far too powerful. Even a sixth heaven celestial king couldn't withstand a single strike, and he was sent flying with a single slap. Just how colossal was the gulf between them? Zhao Qing and the others had still been sneering a moment ago, yet at this instant, their sneers froze on their faces. All that remained was a sense of numbness and fear. This man. Just what kind of freak was he? Pung. Su Huan crashed to the ground, with his originally white robes now tattered and covered in dust. He appeared as disheveled as could be. He crawled up, his eyes filled with fury, humiliation, and terror. In just a single strike, his chin had almost been smashed into smithereens. Not only had he lost several teeth, but even his jaw had been completely shattered. As a sixth heaven celestial king, he had actually failed to withstand even a single strike. He was unwilling to accept this. He was unwilling to believe this. Su Huan shook his right hand, retrieving an extremely small drum, one that was only the size of his palm. It was bright red, and it was as if it were dripping with blood. There were more so wisps of black air rising from it, transforming into countless tortured souls. Ah! My head hurts like hell. It's as if there's a ghost wailing in my mind. Same here. Everyone clasped their head. Some had blood dripping from their eyes, while others had blood seeping from their ears or nose. Many more of them were bleeding from all orifices, resulting in a bloody and terrifying scene. They were all celestial kings. Regardless of how weak they were, they had all reached the level of regulations. Yet, they were actually bleeding because of this small drum. This is Lord Su's soul extinguishing drum. Zhao Qing exclaimed. Who would have thought? Lord Su actually bestowed his soul extinguishing drum on young Master Su. Chapter 26:17, Slain with a Single Cut. Describing this was time-consuming, but in reality, it only took Su Huan an instant to summon these 81 seventh heaven evil spirits that were bellowing at Ling Han. This was a petrifying scene. This was a whopping 81 evil spirits. This was enough to send those at the early stage of the 8th heaven into retreat. Everyone shook their head. The conclusion was already foregone. Regardless of how powerful Ling Han was, there was simply no way that he could reach the 8th heaven. Thus, his only fate was to be devoured by these evil spirits. This was the might of a celestial tool. Ha ha ha. Before a celestial tool, how are you going to turn the tables? Su Huan said with arrogance. This was the source of his confidence. Kneel down and accept death. That way, I can consider granting you a swift death. Ling Han shook his head, saying, I merely wanted to observe the might of your celestial tool. You truly think that I can't defeat you? You're already staring at death, yet you still dare to act with such arrogance? Su Huan scoffed. Hurry up and kneel. Zhao Qing and the others heckled. Right now, they were standing in a position of absolute advantage. You people are nothing but frogs in a well, Ling Han said faintly. Whoosh. The divine demon sword flashed into existence. A cold gleam immediately cut through the air. Pa, 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 pa. All of the evil spirits were immediately slashed into two. However, Su Huan wasn't fazed in the least. These evil spirits didn't have a physical body, and they were instead the divine senses of those that the celestial tool had killed. They were trapped in the soul extinguishing drum for eternity. Thus, it mattered little that they were cleft in half, since they could immediately knit together again. Your struggle is futile, he sneered in disdain. However, in the next instant, his eyes almost popped out of his head. This was because even though the evil spirits squirmed in a struggle to knit back together, they couldn't do so no matter what. all they could do was squirm around in vain. How is this possible? The attack of the celestial tool is this flimsy? What he didn't know was that Ling Han's divine demon sword was also a celestial tool. Moreover, it was a celestial tool that had engulfed a huge amount of divine metal. Even though it still had yet to become a heavenly venerate tool, it was at least far more powerful than ordinary divine metal. While facing heavenly tribulation before, Ling Han had funneled the power of the lightning tribulation into his sword. Even though the latter hadn't been able to absorb much of this power, being tempered by an eighth heaven heavenly tribulation had still raised its might by a significant amount. The might of this slash could rival the attacks of eighth heaven celestial kings. Ling Han's power was at an absolute advantage, so with the sharpness and destructiveness of the divine demon sword, he was naturally able to cut the evil spirits in two. Moreover, they were unable to knit back together no matter what. If it couldn't achieve even this, wouldn't the divine demon sword be nothing more than an ordinary celestial tool? Everyone was rendered speechless with shock. The drum in Su Huan's hand was a celestial tool. Moreover, it was one that had been personally forged by a ninth heaven celestial king. Even though it hadn't unleashed its full might, it had still summoned 81 seventh heaven evil spirits, enough to terrify even eighth heaven celestial kings. Yet, Ling Han had disposed of them with a single slash. Pung! How is he so powerful? How can he possibly be so powerful? Ling Han lowered his sword. He then looked at Su Huan, and asked, "Do you have any more trump cards?" Su Huan's expression changed again and again. He was truly unable to accept Ling Han's arrogance. However, what could he do? Even his celestial tool had failed to suppress Ling Han. He had no option but to call his father for help. However, it was a pity that his father had already entered the ancient tomb long ago. Thus, how could distant water save a nearby fire? You got me this time. Su Huan was someone who was able to swallow his pride. He forcefully suppressed his rage, and turned around to leave. When he regrouped with his father, he would ask him to deal with this brat. "Who allowed you to leave?" Ling Han said calmly. "You still want me to stay?" Su Huan retorted in a haughty voice. His father was none other than Su Fang. Not only was he a ninth heaven celestial king, but he was more so a monarch star. He was powerful enough to flatten any city in the celestial king graveyard. Moreover, the Su clan still had the support of a second-tier heavenly venerate. Ling Han shook his head, saying, "If that's all, then you can die now." He unleashed a punch at Su Huan. Just then, Ling Han hadn't attacked, because he had wanted to see what other trump cards Su Huan had. However, since the latter had nothing else, there was naturally no need for Ling Han to hold back anymore. "What? You actually dare to target me?" Su Huan was both astonished and enraged. Did Ling Han not know who he was? He hurriedly struck the soul-extinguishing drum again, summoning evil spirit after evil spirit. As long as he had energy, he could continue to summon evil spirits to support him. Pung! However, the evil spirits were immediately obliterated by Ling Han's punch. Right now, Ling Han's battle prowess could already rival that of 8th heaven celestial kings, so how could measly 7th heaven evil spirits withstand the might of his fist? Su Huan hurriedly retreated as he continued to strike the soul-extinguishing drum. However, even though he had the help of a celestial tool, unleashing 7th heaven attacks while at the 6th heaven was still extremely taxing, so much so that he wanted to vomit blood. If this continued, even if Ling Han didn't kill him, he would still die from exhaustion. He couldn't help but roar, "Do you know who I am? I'm the son of Su Fang. My father is a 9th heaven monarch star, and he's powerful enough to flatten a city by himself. My ancestor is more so a second-tier heavenly venerate. If you dare to kill me, my father definitely won't forgive you. Moreover, even if you manage to flee from the celestial king graveyard, my ancestor will still be able to sense your aura. Even if you flee to the ends of the world, you still won't be able to escape death. Second-tier heavenly venerate. This was truly a transcendent existence. Indeed, they could guarantee a first-tier heavenly venerate battle prowess regardless of which dimension they went to. However, Ling Han didn't stop. His path was filled with obstacles to overcome, and his Dao was one that surged forward with courage. If he shirked because of his fear of a second-tier heavenly venerate, his accomplishments would only be so. His principles were extremely simple. If others didn't provoke him, then he wouldn't provoke others. If others provoked him, however, he would repay them with 100 times the fury. Huan continued to vomit blood. He was truly striking the soul-extinguishing drum as if his life depended on it. However, each evil spirit was destroyed in a flash, unable to linger around and group together with other evil spirits to trigger a qualitative change. However, if he didn't summon these evil spirits, he would be killed even sooner. Right now, his only option was to resist in vain. Even though he knew that he would eventually die from exhaustion, he still had no option but to commit to this tactic. Attack him together. Zhao Qing immediately shouted. If this continued, Huan would definitely be killed. However, the 6 other people shook in fear. With Huan's strength, and with the help of a celestial tool, he was still utterly suppressed by Ling Han. Thus, what difference could they make? Did they have celestial tools? Were they at the 6th heaven? Sister Qing, we should hurry up and flee. That's right, staying alive is the most important. As long as we find the lords, we can definitely hurry back to save young Master Su. They all shot back in retreat, not daring to seek death. Zhao Qing couldn't help but feel frustrated and angry. To say nothing of how difficult it would be to find Su Fang and the others, even if they found them, how long would that take? At that time, perhaps grass would already be growing before Huan's tombstone. This bunch of cowards. With a roar, she unsheathed her sword and charged at Ling Han. She wasn't just a friend of Huan. Rather, she was his fiancée, and they had already become engaged long ago. Moreover, she was extremely satisfied with her fiancé, and she had extremely high hopes for him. Zhao Qing joined the battle, with her sword drawing down waves of fire. Ling Han turned around, and pointed a finger at Zhao Qing. Pooh! The flames were instantly extinguished, and a small hole instantly appeared in Zhao Qing's chest. Her aura crashed down. Xiao! Seizing this opportunity, Huan immediately turned around to flee, not caring about his fiancée at all. Huan! Zhao Qing exclaimed in shock and disbelief. She hadn't imagined that her bravery would win her such betrayal. Ling Han shook his head, saying, "How pathetically shameless." His eyes were intense and ice-cold. Did Huan truly think that he could escape? How naive. Chapter 26:18, Death of Huan. Ling Han strode forward, drawing on the regulations of space as he did so. Pung! Huan was still fleeing, yet he immediately crashed into a wall, which sent him flying back. He was deeply astonished. With his strength as a 6th heaven celestial king, what wall wouldn't be shattered by him? Moreover, where in the world had this wall come from? Huan focused his gaze, yet he was shocked to discover that this wall was actually Ling Han. I truly overestimated you. With such pathetic behavior, you still have the face to live? Ling Han said coldly. He immediately unleashed a strike at Huan. No. Huan immediately raised the soul-extinguishing drum to block this strike. This was a celestial tool, so even though he was unable to fully awaken it, it would still be impossible for Ling Han to shatter it with brute strength. Ling Han naturally wouldn't attack a celestial tool head-on. Even though Huan couldn't unleash the full power of the celestial tool, if Ling Han dared to attack it head-on, that would be equivalent to triggering the celestial tool to awaken by itself. That would be an extremely foolish move. He retracted his fist at a lightning speed. Huan was delighted upon seeing this. He had successfully evaded an attack. Afterward, he would immediately activate a movement technique and cause his speed to increase fourfold. At that time, Ling Han would be unable to catch him. In your dreams, Ling Han said in an ice-cold voice. Pa. Su Huan heard the sound of bones snapping, after which an agonizing pain shot through his body. He immediately stumbled and collapsed to the ground. Half of his body felt numb and unresponsive. His pelvic bone had been shattered by Ling Han's kick. However, celestial kings were celestial kings, after all, so how could a broken bone stop them in their tracks? Su Huan ignored the pain, with his strong desire to live urging him to use his hands to slam the ground. He instantly shot forward. At his level, there was no need to limit his attacks or movement techniques to just using his hands or feet, as one only needed their divine sense to channel the power of regulations. Su Huan didn't dare to even glance at Ling Han. Right now, there was only a single thought in his mind: to escape. I've already said this many times. If others don't provoke me, then I won't provoke them, Ling Han said calmly. If others provoke me, however, I'll repay them with 100 times the fury. Pooh. When he finished saying this, he had already caught up to Su Huan and unleashed a punch, blasting a huge hole into his back. You, actually, dared. Su Huan said in a quivering voice. This punch had directly obliterated his heart, causing a severe wound. However, even more fatal than this was Ling Han's martial intent that was causing chaos inside his body. Su Huan's divine sense was nothing before this martial intent, and the demise of his mind was imminent. This was his doomsday. My father will definitely kill you. Kill you, he bellowed. He then crashed to the ground, his eyes wide open. In this place, celestial kings were worth as much as dogs. What did it matter that he was a sixth heaven celestial king? What did it matter that he was the descendant of a heavenly venerate? Ling Han retracted his fist, and swept his gaze over the 7 remaining people. Pa, pa, pa. They all fell to their knees, trembling in terror. Please don't kill me, they exclaimed as they kowtowed. Ling Han was unfazed, and he simply asked, if I had been captured by you people, would you have let me live? The answer was clearly no. He immediately lashed out. Pa, pa, pa. How could fifth heaven celestial kings hope to block Ling Han's strikes? Their heads exploded one after another. In just a moment, Su Huan and all 8 of his companions were killed. The surroundings were deathly silent. As the spectators gazed at Ling Han, it was as if they were gazing at a corpse. After all, those 9 people had all come from Heaven Transforming City, a city that was guarded by paramount 9th Heaven Celestial Kings. Yet, Ling Han had killed their descendants just like that. Indeed, it would have been joyful to kill them. However, just how much trouble would this cause? Thus, even though Ling Han looked alive, he was, in fact, already a dead person. In this prison for celestial kings, no one could stop Su Fang and the other paramount celestial kings from killing people regardless of who their opponent was. However, Ling Han paid absolutely no heed to this. Since he had already advanced to the 5th heaven, he was confident that he could escape from the grasp of 9th heaven celestial kings. Moreover, his strength was advancing each day and each hour, so when he reached the 6th heaven, it was very likely that he could even rival 9th heaven monarch tiers. In any case, he felt slightly at a loss as he stared at the soul-extinguishing drum. This was a celestial tool that contained a huge amount of divine metal. If he allowed the divine demon sword to engulf it, it would definitely take another step toward becoming a heavenly venerate tool. However, it was a shame that this celestial tool had been forged by a 9th heaven celestial king. In other words, this celestial tool would become even more ferocious when it didn't have a master. As such, even Ling Han didn't dare to touch it. Otherwise, he would have to face the might of a 9th heaven celestial king. Right now, he had no option but to flee if he came across such a powerful being. Forget about it. I'll collect this celestial tool another day, Ling Han thought to himself. It could be said that he had set his sights on this celestial tool. He gazed toward the ancient tomb. Right now, at least 90% of the Celestial King Graveyard's ninth heaven Celestial Kings were inside this place. Perhaps not all of them, but at least 99% of them had most likely been affected by the black energy as well, causing them to become bloodthirsty and frenzied. If he entered, he would definitely face great peril. Even though he knew this, Ling Han was still extremely resolute as he strode toward the ancient tomb. He was far too curious. Just what in the world was Desolate Moon scheming? Ling Han made his way toward the ancient tomb, and it wasn't long before he disappeared into it. Inside the ancient tomb, Su Fang was currently engaged in an intense battle with a black shadow. He wasn't alone, and there were several other ninth heaven celestial kings battling alongside him. Even so, they were still unable to gain an upper hand. This battle was abnormally difficult. If others saw this, they would definitely exclaim in disbelief. Just what kind of existence was this black shadow? It actually possessed such overwhelming power. Even a team of several ninth heaven celestial kings was unable to suppress it. Looking closely, however, one would discover that this black shadow was actually confined to a small area. Because of this, it was clear that even though Su Fang and the others couldn't win, they couldn't lose either. However, this black shadow was far too quick, and it was impossible to make sense of what exactly it was. Was it a human or a beast? Or perhaps it was a precious tool or some other matter? At this critical moment, Su Fang suddenly faltered. He was clearly the main force of the team, so his sudden falter naturally subjected his team to immense pressure. A celestial king was instantly struck and sent flying by the black shadow, with a gaping wound appearing on his chest. He had suffered a severe wound. "Hurry, retreat," another ninth heaven celestial king immediately exclaimed. They hurriedly shot back in retreat. Because the black shadow was confined to a small area, it immediately turned around after pursuing them for a short distance. "Brother Su, what's wrong?" the others asked as they turned to Su Fang. Su Fang wore an ice-cold expression as he replied, "My son was killed." "What?" the others exclaimed in deep shock. Who was so audacious? They actually dared to kill someone from Heaven Transforming City? Which audacious person was it? Was it the Desolate Moon Alliance or the Seasons Alliance? Or perhaps it was the 10,000 Dragons Alliance? They think that they can become enemies with Heaven Transforming City with an alliance of a few ninth heaven celestial kings? With a thought, Su Fang made a grabbing motion at the void. He then said, "When I retrieve the soul extinguishing drum, I'll naturally know who the culprit is." The others were even more stunned upon hearing this. Su Huan already had the soul extinguishing drum, yet he had still been killed? Even if nephew Huan was unable to unleash the full might of the soul extinguishing drum, he was still capable of reaching the early stage of the eighth heaven, right? That being the case, the culprit at least possesses a battle prowess at the early stage or middle stage of the eighth heaven. Far too many people meet this criterion in the Celestial King Graveyard. It doesn't shrink the pool of people at all. However, no one in the younger generation is capable of killing nephew Huan. Thus, the culprit is definitely an old and experienced Celestial King. As they said this, a small blood-red drum had already shot over from the distance, landing in Su Fang's hand. He sensed it slightly, and fury involuntarily spread across his face. The person who killed my son was a fifth heaven celestial king. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.